Chapter 22. Xieji heaved a long sigh and said, "Yes, Kirin was the only one who didn't die after releasing the real Kirin's arm. However, his strength was instantly reduced to its lowest point. The three beasts that had faced Kirin's fatal blow were also seriously injured and couldn't possibly continue to live. After all, Senior Kirin didn't hold back when he released his energy. The Kirin clan had always been the strongest attack of the ancient beasts, so how could they resist it? The ancient beasts' original plan was completely out of control because the three strongest powerhouses were seriously injured and they immediately fell into panic. Under the leadership of the remaining two Kirin, the ancient beasts slaughtered them crazily at the cost of fresh blood. It was also at that time that the Kirin clan declined greatly, but the ancient beasts also suffered a fatal blow. From then on, the entire ancient almighty beast era gradually declined. What about Senior Kirin? Since releasing Kirin's arm didn't affect his life, how is he now? Qiyu asked impatiently. He had already forgotten that Hai Rue and Ji Mingming were behind him and was concentrating on communicating with Xieji. He was completely immersed in the story of Kirin's 8 treasures. Senior Kirin's ending was tragic, but when his life was over, none of the ancient beasts blamed him. After he destroyed the 3 great beasts at the cost of his Kirin's arm, the ancient beasts began their massacre. During this process, the remaining 2 Kirin hated the 9-tailed fox and their first target was to kill her. The 9-tailed fox didn't dodge. Her eyes were fixed on Senior Kirin and she was prepared to accept death calmly. She didn't cry, nor did she smile, but Senior Black Qilin could see the light of love and endless sorrow in her eyes that couldn't be faked. At that moment, Senior Kirin felt the sorrow and helplessness in the 9-tailed fox's heart. Therefore, Senior Kirin took action. Qiyu clenched his fists and said firmly, "If it were me, no matter what happens in the future, I will protect my woman. Even if everything is wrong, I would rather use my own blood to wash away the sins on her body." They were all family and loved ones. Since he had already lost his parents and family, he would never let his loved ones be hurt again. "Even if you have to replace me." This time, it was Qiyu's Xieji's turn to be stunned, and his mind fluctuated violently. "Did you know?" "Qiyu," Xieji said faintly. Qiyu was also surprised that he could say such a thing. He shook his head blankly and said, "Know what?" Xieji said, "What that senior reported was the same as what you said. When he arrived at the headquarters of the primordial fierce beasts, he had already made up his mind to die. Because of him, 4 of his loved ones had died. He could not forgive himself, and it was impossible for him to continue to live. He led the mythological beasts to the headquarters of the primordial fierce beasts just to do 2 things. The first was to bring hatred to the beasts and use their lives to avenge his loved ones. The other was to find out whether the 9-tailed fox loved him or not. At that time, he did not ask, but the 9-tailed fox's eyes had already told him everything. Therefore, when his 2 uncles launched Kirin's secret art to attack the 9-tailed fox, he moved. "You said he moved twice. What did he do?" Qiyu's voice trembled uncontrollably and 2 lines of tears slowly flowed down his face. Xieji's voice was a little choked. "I told you that although Kirin would not die once he lost the ultimate Kirin's arm, his strength would also fall to the bottom. He would need a long time to practice and rely on his own super recovery ability to restore his Kirin's horn. If he was at his peak, Senior Kirin could even compete with his 2 uncles. However, at that time, how could he compete with them? Therefore, he used a secret art created by the Kirin clan. It was a destructive secret art like Kirin's arm. It was called Release. Release. Yes, it was Release. He released his own soul. Only by completely releasing his own soul could he use the power of release. Unlike Kirin's arm, even Kirin could not recover after using Release. At that moment, the power that he erupted actually blocked the full blow of his 2 uncles. Qiyu's voice was choked. He could imagine the eyes of Senior Kirin at that time, the despair in his heart and the deep love he had for the nine-tailed fox. Release. What else did he do besides releasing his soul? Xie voice became even lower. The so-called release was releasing all of his Kirin's armor. In other words, at that moment, Senior Ink Kirin injected all his soul into the Kirin's armor, forcibly separating his scales and hair from his body. With his weak body at that time, he released an unusually powerful strength. He blocked the attack of his two uncles. The entire battlefield stopped because of his sudden attack. Ink Kirin became Bloody Kirin. There was not a single part of his body that was intact. In the end, he finally grabbed the nine-tailed fox's hand. He only said one sentence. He said, "I am willing to use everything, including my life and body, in exchange for her life." Both divine beasts and ferocious beasts were shocked by his voice. His voice was not loud, nor was it emotional. However, it was this calm voice that contained incomparable majesty. That was the true majesty of Kirin. No one dared to offend his majesty. At that moment, he became the king of divine beasts again, the true king of divine beasts. Before he died, he took a deep look at the nine-tailed fox and did not say a word to her. I am afraid that only the nine-tailed fox could understand everything contained in his eyes. The tears in Chi Yu's eyes wet the front of his shirt. His blood was completely boiling. Why did it have to end like this? Why? Whose fault is this? If he was not Kirin and she was not a ferocious beast, if they did not meet each other under such circumstances, then how could everything have turned out like this? This time, Chi Yu did not speak to Xie in his heart. Instead, he shouted it out loud. His voice was full of sorrow and the atmosphere in the entire room became gloomy. An invisible majesty silently exuded from his body. The clothes on Chi Yu's upper body actually turned into powder on its own. The black and silver light became extremely bright. The strong light was like a dazzling star. The four-colored light under Ink Kirin's feet emitted a faint light. Purple, blue, red, and green, all of them became unusually bright. Chi Yu's eyes changed. They became two colors, one black and the other silver. That huge pressure caused even Ming Ming to unconsciously hide behind Ryue. Now, Chi Yu seemed to have lost his consciousness. He slowly knelt on the ground. His movements were very slow, but every movement was filled with a dignified aura. When his knees touched the ground, he slowly bowed down. Every bow was so steady and powerful. When his forehead touched the ground, it made a loud sound. A total of 9 times. Each time, he touched the ground without holding back. When he raised his upper body again, his forehead had become a purplish red. The light in Chi Yu's eyes did not change. He just knelt there. His voice became low, but he was still choking with sobs. 3 seniors, you have sacrificed too much for the Kirin clan. Perhaps I am not a qualified Kirin. However, I swear on my life, soul, and everything that I will not disgrace you. In his eyes, there were not only 3 treasures of Kirin in front of him. At the same time, there were the souls of the 3 ancestors of Kirin. Looking at them, Chi Yu seemed to see the heroic bearing of the 3 ancestors of Kirin. The ink Kirin on Chi Yu's body slowly separated from his body and formed a huge light projection that floated behind him. A low roar came from Chi Yu's mouth. The light projection of ink Kirin behind him raised its head and roared. Its silver and black fur became extremely eye-catching. The pure light suddenly erupted, and a huge aura enveloped the entire room. A red light seemed to turn into a red bolt of lightning. In an instant, it pierced through the sky and pierced the light projection of ink Kirin in the air. The red light gradually became clearer. It was located at the chest of ink Kirin's light projection. The black scales and silver fur, coupled with the red diamond-shaped scales that were emitting a bright light, made it look even more mighty. A scorching aura burned around ink Kirin's body. Although it was only an invisible flame, the huge aura was enough to suffocate people. Original form mutation, dragon. Original form mutation, chicken. Both Ji Mingming and Hai Ryue couldn't bear the pressure and had no choice but to use their original form mutation. In an instant, white dragon scales and colorful feathers appeared on their bodies. At this moment, the pressure they were enduring was no longer painful. They could clearly feel that Chi Yu's body was like a huge energy vortex that was constantly releasing huge amounts of energy into every inch of their scales and feathers. Under such circumstances, Hai Ryue and Ji Mingming closed their eyes unconsciously and began to cultivate in coordination with their ascending cloud technique. Zagru had once told them that as a Zodiac warrior, hard cultivation was extremely important. However, it was equally important to seize opportunities. Although they didn't know why everything was happening in front of them, they wouldn't miss such an opportunity. Unfortunately, they didn't see what happened next after they started cultivating. Chi-Yu, who was standing in front of the table, was still standing there calmly. 4 colored lights shone from his body at the same time. Then, the Kirin pearl on the right flew up slowly. Unlike Kirin's red, it didn't merge with Kirin's light projection. Instead, it floated in front of Chi-Yu. When Chi-Yu looked at it, it was like an eye that could see through everything. It stared at Chi-Yu carefully. They looked at each other and sensed each other. Chi-Yu's gaze didn't change, but the Kirin pearl started to tremble slightly. It was like a child who had left home and finally found his home. With a flash of light, purple, blue, red, and cyan lights shone brightly at the same time. Then, these 4 lights instantly formed a halo around Chi-Yu's neck. Chi-Yu's body felt scorching hot, cold, numb, and floating at the same time. Then, he felt a chill on his chest. The 4-colored Kirin pearl was tightly attached to his chest. Its position was exactly at the tip of the Kirin pattern on Chi-Yu's body. On the other hand, a thin necklace appeared on the Qilin pearl. The necklace was formed from 4 unknown metals: purple, blue, red, and green. It was a single entity, forming a fine scale-like structure. It was calmly attached to Chi-Yu's neck, and the 4 sparkling and translucent lights looked extremely comfortable. "Seniors, do you all approve of me?" Chi-Yu's tears fell on the Kirin pearl. With a flash of light, the tears were absorbed by the Kirin pearl without warning. An invisible domineering aura and a hopeful aura emanated from the Kirin pearl and enveloped Chi-Yu's body. The feeling of hope stimulated Chi-Yu's senses. He couldn't help but let out another loud roar, causing the whole secret room to tremble. Finally, Chi-Yu's gaze fell on the dark red cloak. He was still kneeling, but his eyes were no longer calm. His originally frivolous face had become unprecedentedly serious. "Senior Ink Kirin, you and I are both Ink Kirin. I can feel your sorrow. I don't know what this Kirin pearl you made has. I don't want to know either. I just hope that as the heir of the Kirin clan, I can personally protect the ruins that you left behind and pass down your story forever. Senior Ink Kirin, can I take your body with me? Or rather, your skin?" The sorrow became a bond that connected Chi-Yu and Kirin pearl. The strong aura of sorrow gradually faded. Chi-Yu could clearly feel that although Kirin pearl was filled with a strong resentment, it also contained a very special aura. It seemed to be the aura of hope, but it was a strange hope that could not be described. "Senior, what do you want to say to me?" Chi-Yu pretended to listen attentively, but all he could feel was the low whimper. The dark red Kirin pearl floated up like a dark red blood cloud. While Chi-Yu was listening, it had already quietly draped over his shoulders. The faint sorrow contained a feeling of understanding. It was a kind of recognition and seemed to be a kind of relief. "It has recognized you." Xie voice was a little gratified. "Senior Ink Kirin has recognized your aura. Kirin's octatic treasures can only be used by Kirin. They do not call you by your ability, but by your heart. Only by gaining their recognition can you become their new master. Your understanding and tears let Kirin pearl's sorrow be expressed, so it has recognized you." Chi-Yu gently stroked the dark red cloak that was like skin. "Senior Xie, after the death of Senior Ink Kirin, did this cloak appear? What about Senior Nine-Tailed Fox? What was her ending? Xieji said, "This story has always been passed down among the ancient beasts and ancient ferocious beasts. At that time, after the death of Senior Ink Kirin, the essence and blood in his body completely merged with his skin that had lost its scales and hair. At that time, humans had already appeared. Perhaps it was because Senior Ink Kirin had a premonition of the future of the Kirin clan, so this Kirin pearl was created. When I heard this story from the ancestors, I thought that Senior Nine-Tailed Fox would die with Senior Ink Kirin. However, the result was not so. Senior Nine-Tailed Fox did not even cry. She just murmured, 'I can't die, I can't die.' After that, he left with Senior Black Qilin's flesh and blood, but he left this Qilin concealment for the ancient divine beast. Since then, no one has seen Nine-Tailed Fox, and no one knows where she went. She and Senior Ink Kirin's remains have become a mystery that no one has been able to solve until now." Qi Yu said with some sluggishness, "Perhaps there is a reason that gave her the courage to continue living. But whether it is Senior Ink Kirin or Senior Nine-Tailed Fox, they are very worthy of admiration. Their courage and final choice are something that ordinary people can never achieve. If it were me, maybe I would have already broken down." Xieji said, "Maybe so. What Kirin Pearl can bring you is the power of 3 invisibility. That is the concealment of breath, concealment of energy, and concealment of body. When you wear it, no one will be able to feel your Kirin breath, and they will not be able to feel whether you are strong or weak. When your Thundercloud Force and Kirin Pearl are combined, as long as you do not use Thundercloud Force to attack, then your body will remain invisible. Of course, the length of the invisibility is directly related to your Thundercloud Force. This is the same as Kirin Pearl. Moreover, Kirin Pearl has the ability to not be damaged by any metal equipment. It itself is a treasure with very strong defensive power. As for what its full ability is like, I do not know. Perhaps no one in the Kirin clan can fully exert its ability. After all, no one in the Kirin clan can reach the state of mind of Senior Ink Kirin. The clear light and shadow of Kirin behind Qi Yu stepped on the 4-colored auspicious cloud and poured into Qi Yu's body from behind and merged with him. Qi Yu clearly felt that the power of the 4 clouds that he had lost because he used the ability of Kirin's arm had reappeared. Although it was not strong and could only produce a faint light, it really existed. The power of the 4 clouds was slowly circulating along the route that he tried to practice today. And his own Kirin breath had become more condensed. Hai Ryue and Ji Mingming woke up from their short practice. When Kirin Invisible was on Qi Yu's shoulder, they could not feel the huge Kirin breath of Qi Yu anymore. It was as if he had become an ordinary person again. However, when they looked at the ruffian Kirin from behind, they were surprised to find that Qi Yu's body seemed to have grown a little taller. Especially the melancholy breath that they had never had before, it made him seem like he had gained something. "How did you do it?" Ryue, who was as calm as the sea, could not help but exclaim. Qi Yu wiped away the remaining tears on his face and turned around to look at the 2 girls. "I did not do anything. These things originally belonged to Kirin. I only protected them with my heart." Hai Ryue frowned slightly and said, "Do you know? These 3 pieces of equipment belonged to Kirin. No human who inherited Kirin's bloodline has ever been able to fully use them. According to Master Zagru, the most outstanding Kirin in the past could at most get the pearl and the red scale. As for that strange cloak, no one has ever been able to wear it. It has an extremely strong aura of repulsion. Even Master Zagru's powerful Buddhist energy could not get rid of the negative emotions it carried. I am really curious why it would approve of you." Qi Yu said indifferently, "Are you trying to say why it approved of a ruffian like me? I can only say that these 3 treasures of Kirin contain the story of our Kirin clan. But this is Kirin's secret. Alright, can we go out now?" The way Hai Ryue looked at Qi Yu changed slightly. At this moment, he seemed to have become a different person. In fact, Hai Ryue did not know that Chi Yu was still immersed in the tragedy of Ink Kirin. Coupled with the feeling of Kirin's sad aura, he temporarily had this kind of emotion. Coming out of the secret room again, Hai Ryue and Ming Ming were surprised to find that the cloak on Chi Yu's body was gone. The serious expression on his face also gradually relaxed. He sat on the sofa in the room as if he was very tired. His eyes were somewhat dull, as if he was thinking about something. Ming Ming glanced at Hai Ryue. Although they all knew that some changes had happened to Chi Yu, no one knew where this change appeared. It felt like he was still so weak. Other than the aura of Kirin that had the demeanor of a king, there was no strong energy fluctuation. But for some reason, even Hai Ryue felt that she seemed to have underestimated this ruffian. After a short daze, Chi Yu quickly recovered. "All right, Ming Ming, let's go. T-Rex, don't forget that you promised me a job." Hai Ryue said indifferently, "I will not forget. Ming Ming, tomorrow morning I will go to Qingbei to find you. Chi Yu, since you have already obtained 3 pieces of Kirin's equipment and are also in Qingbei University, I think there will not be any trouble for the time being. This is for you. If you encounter any danger, you can press the red gem on it." While speaking, she handed over a bracelet to Chi Yu. It was somewhat similar to the one she wore before. The platinum bracelet had a red gem the size of the first joint of a thumb. The rest of the bracelet was platinum. It was about 3 centimeters thick and 1.5 centimeters wide. Chi Yu took the bracelet and buckled it on his left wrist. The size was just right, and it was completely close to his skin. Hai Ryue said, "Your thundercloud force is still too weak. It is unable to detect a strong aura. Wait until your thundercloud force is a bit stronger. Then you can use it. The bracelet is also a pager. As long as you encounter trouble within the radius of 1 square kilometer, you can press the gem on it and turn it to the left. The surrounding Zodiac warriors will receive the message and quickly rush to your side. Also, after Ming Ming leaves, you must not easily leave Qingbei University. From the geomancy of Qingbei University, it is a dragon's cave. It itself has a very strong geomancy. Only in Qingbei University can your Kirin aura be restrained. This is also the reason why I will let you go there. After 3 months, as long as we can safely pass through the exchange, I will naturally give you a job. During this period of time, I hope that you will diligently cultivate and strive to find the other Zodiac guardian god." When Chi Yu walked out of the secret room, Hai Ryue and Ming Ming had already recovered from their original attribute mutation. They once again wore their own clothes. Chi Yu looked at the bracelet on his wrist. He turned the side of the ruby to his wrist. In this way, the real appearance of the bracelet could not be seen from the outside. The gem appeared dull and could not attract people's attention. He did not reply to Hai Ryue's words. Instead, he directly walked out of the villa. Ming Ming looked at Hai Ryue. Her eyes carried a bit of worry. "Big Sister Ryue, actually Chi Yu is a good person. No one is born a ruffian. Isn't your relationship with him?" Hai Ryue raised her hand to stop Ming Ming from continuing. She coldly looked at Chi Yu's back. "He is Kirin. To me, he is only a companion of the Zodiac warrior. If he can become strong, I will naturally respect him. But if he will only be a burden to us, what do you think I should do?" Ming Ming looked at Hai Ryue speechlessly. She lightly sighed and said, "Big Sister Ryue, I don't know why, but your rigid relationship with him always makes me feel uncomfortable. Although Chi Yu is a ruffian, I found that he actually has a very strong self-esteem. You have hit him more than once. I am afraid that there will be deeper conflicts in the future. Master Zagru once said that only when we, the 12 Zodiac Guardians, unite with the King of the Zodiac, Kirin, can we truly become strong enough to protect the East. I think Chi Yu will slowly change." Hai Ryue's face softened a bit. Her eyes revealed a trace of complexity. "Thank you, Ming Ming. Perhaps I really have some prejudice against him. I'll try to be nice to him. Don't worry, I will focus on the big picture. You should leave too, don't let him wait too long. Ming Ming heaved a sigh of relief. She smiled slightly and suddenly leaned close to Hai Ryue, kissing her affectionately on the cheek. Thank you, big sister Ryue. I will leave first. After saying that, she quickly ran out. Hai Ryue looked at the bouncing Ming Ming and couldn't help but smile. She indifferently said, Silly Ming Ming, there are some things that you don't understand. Do you think that I can't see what kind of person Chiyu is? In fact, he is the same as me, we both have the ability to mutate. I am a dragon with the mixed blood of the East and West, and he is Ink Kirin. If I don't stimulate his self-esteem, how will he abandon his original hooligan habits and work hard? At this point, the cold lines on her face suddenly softened a lot. Chiyu walked out of the door of the villa and was blown by the cold wind in the courtyard. He immediately felt much better, and the sadness in his heart disappeared with the disappearance of Kirin. He had just calmed down when he heard a bang. A huge figure fell 3 meters away from him. The one who had fallen was none other than his disciple, Jida. Uncle Zhou was still standing in the position where Chiyu entered the villa. His hands were slowly raised in front of him, and his footsteps were still the same as before, as if he had not moved at all. Other than a few more wrinkles on his clothes, no one could imagine that Jida's huge body was actually thrown by him. Jida's appearance was much worse than Uncle Zhou's. He struggled to get up from the ground, and his clothes were already torn. Looking at his dirty face, it was obvious that this was not the first time he had fallen. Damn, how is this possible? Grandmaster, how did you do it? Although Jida was a little angry, it seemed that he did not want to try again. Uncle Zhou put away his posture, smiled slightly, and said, I haven't met a strong person like you for a long time. Your strength is very domineering, and the fire is enough. If I'm not wrong, your original cultivation started from external martial arts, and then gradually changed to internal martial arts. After a long period of hard training, you have cultivated to the current state. Looking at your own situation, you have reached the limit that the human body can reach. In fact, I can't win against you. I can only throw you, but I can't really hurt you. Your foundation is very solid, but what you lack is the application of internal martial arts and the assistance of some martial arts. Jida nodded thoughtfully and said, I heard from a senior in the army that my strength is already very strong. Unless I meet a real hidden master, otherwise I will not be defeated. I didn't expect Grandmaster to be a hidden master. You must accept me. I want to learn from you when you threw me just now. Uncle Zhou glanced at Chiyu, who was walking out of the villa, and smiled lightly and said, If you don't mind, from tomorrow onwards, come to me at 5 o'clock every day. I can take you to cultivate together. With your physical condition and solid foundation, you will definitely be able to carry forward my martial arts, and I will be able to face my ancestors. After saying this, he walked to Chiyu's side, smiled, and thanked him before returning to the villa. Chapter 23. Jida scratched his head and said, Your brother is screwed this time. This Grandmaster is much stronger than I imagined. No matter how I attack him, he only needs to slightly change his posture to divert my force to the side. Once I get close enough to touch his body, there's a strange force that flings me away. Moreover, this force seems to contain my own. It's as if he and I threw me away together. It's really strange. Chiyu's mood had already recovered a lot. He walked to Jida's side and said, This is called the 18 Stain Falls. You should learn from Teacher Zhou in the future. He's more suitable to be your master. Jida, I want to discuss something with you. Jida was stunned and said, What is it? Go ahead, master. Chiyu glanced at Ming Ming and whispered, What's the displacement of your car? Jida said somewhat proudly, 6 liters. Strong, right? Chiyu was dumbfounded. How much? 6 liters or 6.0 displacement. F*CK. The Hummer seems to be only 6.0 displacement. Chiyu's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he wanted to eat Jida up. Jida laughed mischievously and said, "The Hummer is nothing. This car of mine has been with me for 6 or 7 years. It's only after constant modifications that it became like this. Don't be fooled by its ordinary appearance. In fact, the parts inside are all special. There are a total of 12 cylinders arranged according to Volkswagen's W12 arrangement. I found special materials and assembled it myself. Moreover, I also used Chrysler's cylinder braking technology. When it's not needed, only 4 cylinders will operate, but in special circumstances, it can become 12 cylinders operating at the same time. Moreover, I also installed a mechanical supercharger on top. The maximum horsepower is close to 800. How about it? Fierce, right?" Chiyu was speechless. "This is an off-road vehicle. With such a large displacement, aren't you afraid of overturning it?" Jida became even more proud when he heard this. "How could it overturn? I added 2 differential locks to the front and back of the car. Its reaction speed is 1/10,000th of a second. In special circumstances, I can adjust it myself. All kinds of electronic facilities are extremely complete. Let alone an off-road vehicle, I even have the confidence to race with a super sports car." "Master, do you like cars too?" Chiyu said excitedly. "I don't like it, I like it too much." "Jida, did I hear wrongly? You said that you assembled this car yourself? The cows are flying in the sky." Jida snorted. "Master, do you think it's that easy to be an elite in the Special Forces? The reason why I was assigned to this special unit is not because I can fight. It's because I have a special ability. Come on, let's talk in the car. I'll prove it to you." She looked strangely at Chiyu, who had previously been emitting a sorrowful aura, as if he had become a completely different person. However, she could faintly feel that Chiyu's sorrowful emotions were purposefully hidden and not as simple as disappearing on the surface. The 3 of them left the Dragonfield courtyard and got into Jida's car. Jida took out a stack of documents from the suitcase beside the driver's seat and handed it to Chiyu. Chiyu took the documents and flipped through them using the light in the car. "Damn, tractor driver's license. What's the use of this? Motorcycle driver's license. You're so big you can only drive a Harley. Special car driver's license. Special driver's license. Looks like you're really something. Damn, how can you have a yacht driver's license? What's this? Damn, it's a fighter jet driver's license, and a helicopter driver's license. You wicked disciple, is there anything you can't drive?" When Chiyu raised his head again, his eyes were full of shock. Jida laughed and said, "Master, you're the king of the Zodiac. I don't need to keep it a secret from you. My ability is mechanical omnipotence. Not only can I use any kind of machinery, but I can also use existing resources to assemble all kinds of machinery that I need. I'm a genius when it comes to mechanics. Master, I'm also a Ph.D. in mechanic. You can't tell, can you?" Chiyu was completely speechless this time. Looking at Jida's huge body, he couldn't associate him with the word Ph.D. Jida's expression suddenly became dignified. "Since we've already talked about this, I might as well tell you. After I left the Blue Dragon Special Forces, I directly joined a special force directly under the command of the Military Commission, the highest military authority of the Yanhuang Republic. The direct leader of this force is my and Mingming's father. However, to command this special force, it requires at least 3 members of the Military Commission to issue an order, and it can only be executed with the approval of the President of the Yanhuang Republic. It can be said that our special force is the highest military secret of the Yanhuang Republic. The codename of this force is the Soul of Yanhuang." Hearing the 3 words Soul of Yanhuang, Chiyu's heart suddenly beat violently. "Then what kind of people are in this force?" Jida whispered. "There are only 20 members in the Soul of Yanhuang, but all of them are the best of the best. Some of them even have special abilities. Each of them has their own special ability. After I joined this force, I was codenamed Mechanical Soul. As for the other people in the soul of Yen Huang, I can't say. Chiyu showed a look of understanding and said, Okay, I know this is a secret. I don't want to know too many secrets. If I know too many secrets, my little life will be in danger. Okay, let's not talk nonsense. Jida, how about this? I won't ask you for a salary, but you lend me this car to drive, how about it? Jida was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. As soon as he heard Chi-Yu wanted to borrow the car, he immediately reacted. No, absolutely not. Master, this is my life. I can't lend it. Even if I have to borrow my wife, I won't lend it. Chi-Yu unhappily replied, Don't tell me it's your concubine. Jida's eyes were filled with deep emotions as he gently stroked the steering wheel in front of him. Master, you don't know this, but I personally assembled every single part of this car. To me, it's like my child. Master, don't make it difficult for me, okay? Other than me, I haven't driven it for anyone else. Chi-Yu laughed and said, Jida, let's discuss it. I won't borrow much, just 1 hour is enough, and you can sit in the car and watch me. I promise not to damage your precious car in the slightest. I just want to drive it for a while, that's all. You know, men love cars. Cars can be said to be a man's second house. Actually, did you know that I've always dreamed of having my own off-road vehicle? Unfortunately, I'm poor. When Jida heard Chi-Yu say that he also liked cars, the expression on his face suddenly relaxed a lot. Master, you also like off-road cars? Great minds think alike. Chi-Yu laughed and moved closer to Jida. He squinted at Ming Ming and whispered, My biggest dream is to have an off-road car. I originally wanted to have a Cadillac SRX. Jida curled his lips and said, What's so good about that car? Its size can only be said to be average. As for the power, only the Polaris engine can be considered good. The production is relatively rough. There is nothing good about it. Chi-Yu smiled lewdly and said, You don't understand. Although the SRX wasn't outstanding in terms of performance, it had a little advantage. It had 2 buttons and 3 rows of seats in the car. After pressing the button, the back 2 rows of seats can be put under the chassis of the car. In this way, the whole back becomes a huge flat space. The length of the SRX is more than 5 meters, and the width is more than 2 meters. Once the back 2 rows of seats are put together, even a big guy like you can lie down. Then, get a hover bed ready and you can sleep at any time. That's my dream. If I can have an SRX in the future, I can drive it everywhere to pick up girls. I will paste 4 big words on the 4 windows of the car. Jida asked curiously, What 4 words? Chi-Yu said proudly, Mobile sex room. Jida opened his mouth and looked at Chi-Yu as if he was looking at a Martian. Although Chi-Yu deliberately lowered his voice, Ming Ming's face changed. She turned her head and looked out of the window. Chi-Yu smiled shamelessly and said, How is it? Isn't it very creative? Driving such a luxurious off-road car everywhere to pick up girls, and also saving money for a hotel room. How enjoyable is this? It can be used as a battlefield at any time. Jida swallowed his saliva and said, This works? It seems that only the SRX has this function. However, Master, if you paste those 4 words, aren't you afraid of the police arresting you? Chi-Yu snorted and said, What do you know? Those 4 words aren't pasted on one side. The police can only see 2 at most. Can't I paste mobile sex room on one side and mobile sex room on the other side? F***ck Master, you're too lewd. Jida's eyes lit up and he deliberately looked at the back seat of his car. He seemed to be thinking about how to modify it. Chi-Yu said, Alright, are you going to lend it to me or not? I've already let you follow me in the car. What are you afraid of? Jida hesitated and said, Master, are you really only driving for an hour? Also, you can't collide with it. Although my car's safety performance is good, I can't bear to collide with it. Chi-Yu patted his shoulder and said, Don't worry, your master's skills are not worse than yours. After all, I've been driving for a few years. Jida looked at the 19-year-old Chi-Yu with a puzzled look. Although he had doubts in his heart, he could only nod helplessly. He didn't call him master for nothing. The strength of Chi Yu and Uncle Zhou had already brought him great shock and respect. The two exchanged seats and sat in Jida's seat. Chi Yu was suddenly very excited. He skillfully adjusted the position of the seat and the mirror. He really looked like an experienced driver, which made Jida feel a little relieved. He glanced at his watch and said, "Master, 1 hour. All right, stop being so wishy-washy like a woman. Which button is the one that adds the other 8 cylinders?" Jida suddenly felt like he was on a pirate ship. He speechlessly pointed to a button on the steering wheel. It was the first time in his life that someone said he was like a woman. Chi Yu secretly laughed in his heart. If Jida knew that he didn't even have a driver's license, he didn't know what he would think. It wasn't that he didn't want to get a driver's license, but it cost money, and it wasn't cheap. Jida's off-road vehicle suddenly rushed forward. Chi Yu's foot seemed to be unable to step on the gas pedal. When he saw that he was about to reach the red light in front of him, he forcefully stepped on the brake. The tires screeched and suddenly made a right turn. "Slow down, master, slow down." Jida listened to the screeching of his precious car and closed his eyes in pain. However, he had to admit that Chi Yu's driving skills were extremely skilled. His movements were very fast, and the gear changes were like moving clouds and flowing water. The car's speed was always maintained at a high level, and it constantly weaved through the traffic. Fortunately, Jida's car had a military license plate, so he didn't encounter any police cars along the way. It only took Chi Yu 20 minutes to drive from Longyu Courtyard, which was next to the airport highway, to the second ring road in Beijing. At 9 o'clock, the road conditions weren't very good. Even if it was Jida himself, it would be best to drive at this speed. With a screech, the off-road vehicle steadily stopped under an overpass on the east side of the second ring road. Chi Yu said excitedly, "Awesome, it's really F***king awesome. A good car is really different. Jida, your front and rear differential locks bring stability like a car. You must have installed a balance bar. Also, your car's chassis can actually rise and fall according to the speed. Not bad, that's even better." As he spoke, he had already opened the door and jumped out of the car. Ming Ming sat in the car and smiled bitterly. "Brother, why do I feel that agreeing to lend him the car was a very wrong decision?" Jida said, "I think so too, but I've already lent it. Anyway, it's only an hour. Now, I just hope that the master doesn't crash my car." As they spoke, they looked out of the car at Chi Yu. Only then did they realize that there were already more than 10 cars gathered on the roadside under the overpass. These cars didn't look high-end, but from the exaggerated large enclosure and tail fins, as well as the colorful colors, it was clear that these cars had been modified. The engine hummed from time to time, bringing a burst of blood-boiling sound. Jida saw that Chi Yu had walked to some of the people gathered and said something. Then, he turned back and pointed to his car. Suddenly, the bad premonition in his heart became stronger. Chi Yu used his body to block Jida's line of sight. His hands were in front of his body, and he didn't know what he was doing. From the disdainful gazes of those guys with dyed hair and obviously not decent people, Jida suddenly understood something. After a while, Chi Yu returned. He sat back in the car and fastened his seatbelt. He laughed and said, "This time, I'm going to let them know how powerful I am." Ming Ming said, "Chi Yu, what are you doing here?" Chi Yu put a cigarette in his mouth and lit it. He handed one to Suda and said, "You still haven't come out? Of course, it's to race. In the past, I could only ride in other people's cars. Don't look at their ordinary appearance. The modifications are also very exaggerated. Each of them has a supercharger, and there are even twin turbines. They're very fierce. Today, I'm going to fight it out with them. Have you heard of 13th Wang on the second ring? It's that blonde over there. However, he's still not a true master. That woman over there with earrings is the most fierce here. She once set a record of more than 8 minutes for one lap on the second ring. Today, she's my target. Master, that won't do. 8 minutes for one lap on the second ring. How fast is that? No matter what, the second ring is dozens of kilometers. Jida looked at the excited Chiyu and immediately knew something was wrong. Chiyu snorted and said, "A man has to keep his word. We agreed on 1 hour. There are still 40 minutes left." Chiyu ignored Suda and drove to the back of the dozen cars. He seemed very focused, as if he were participating in an F1 Grand Prix. When the time reached 10 o'clock, there was a huge roar under the overpass. More than a dozen cars rushed into the second ring road at high speed. Although the second ring road at 10 o'clock was no longer congested, it definitely couldn't compare to the feeling of a highway. The sudden jump of more than a dozen cars immediately caused a screech of brake. Chiyu switched to the lowest gear and slammed his foot on the accelerator. His right foot stamped on the accelerator and brake at the same time. The steering wheel turned and Jida's off-road vehicle suddenly emitted a squeal. It moved sideways and entered the innermost lane. Then, under the effect of Chiyu's low gear and big accelerator, his speed was no slower than the other cars. Seeing that he couldn't stop Chiyu, Jida had to fasten his seatbelt and calmly observe the situation in front of him. As Chiyu said, the most powerful person was the dinosaur-like girl with colorful clothes. Her red car, whose original model was unknown, rushed to the first place. After a few beautiful intersections, she had already overtaken several cars and rushed out. Chiyu's eyes glowed brightly. As the car sped up, he followed the cars in front of him, weaving in and out. There were a few times when he nearly rear-ended a car, but he managed to pull the car back by stepping on the brake. As he drove, he excitedly said, "You guys don't know, but racing is my favorite pastime. But it's too difficult to drive these guys' cars. Every time, I have to spend a lot of money to have fun. This time, I must step on all of them." He was so excited that he didn't even notice the ashes falling on him. As the car swayed left and right quickly, Ming Ming's face became a little pale. Although Jida, who had been trained for a long time, didn't feel anything, when he heard the violent sound of the tires, his facial muscles twitched. He secretly prayed in his heart, "Master, you have to be merciful." The speed of the car continued to increase. The red car in the front had already left Chiyu and the others behind by 200 to 300 meters. Although Jida was distressed about his car, he couldn't help but admire it. Although he didn't like the girl, her driving skills were at least at a professional level. She grasped all the opportunities to overtake the car just right. In comparison, Chiyu was a little worse. Just when Jida thought that Chiyu couldn't win, the car suddenly tilted to the side, startling Jida. If it wasn't for the seat belt holding his huge body in place, he was afraid that he would have hit the side. He was surprised to see that his off-road car, under Chiyu's control, suddenly rushed out from the innermost lane and directly rushed to the outermost lane. Moreover, the car didn't stop, but directly rushed to the shoulder of the road. In an instant, Jida suddenly understood what Chiyu meant. The shoulder of the road was used for emergency parking. Under normal circumstances, no one would drive there. And now, Chiyu was fighting for his life. The next moment, he saw Chiyu press the button that he mentioned. From 4 cylinders directly to 12, coupled with the effect of mechanical supercharging, a strong sense of pushing back was felt. The off-road car fiercely rushed forward like a rocket launcher. In just 4 or 5 seconds, it had gone from 120 to 200. It should be known that although those modified cars could also reach this speed, it would take a long time to accelerate. The performance of the 12 cylinders was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. It was absolutely impossible to feel this kind of feeling without experiencing a high speed of more than 200 miles per hour. The scenery on the side of the second ring road suddenly changed. The scenery that should have been parallel suddenly seemed to be tilted upwards. The scenery seemed to be somewhat distorted. The speed of the off-road car continued to increase. It seemed that in just a few breaths, Chi-Yu suddenly passed the red car, which was originally in first place, through the shoulder of the road and rushed to the front. Because of his nervousness, Chi-Yu's hands were already covered with sweat. His eyes were fixed on everything in front of him, and he was ready to react as quickly as possible. When an ordinary car reached a speed of 200 miles per hour, the control would obviously be a lot lower. If the steering wheel was suddenly turned, it was very likely that it would fly out diagonally. However, Jida's specially modified car was completely different. The speed increased, but the steering wheel became abnormally heavy and stable. No matter how Chi-Yu operated, the whole car seemed to be one with his car, and it easily reached the goal he wanted to achieve. Because of the high speed, the chassis of the off-road car had been reduced to the level of a car. Chi-Yu fiercely weaved a few times, and with a high speed of 200 miles per hour, he had already left his opponents behind. The race was still going on. If Jida hadn't taken the cigarette butt from Chi-Yu's mouth, he probably wouldn't have even known that it had burned his mouth. This feeling of speed could definitely make people's blood boil. The traffic in front of them gradually increased. Although Chi-Yu was working hard, he had to slow down. From the rearview mirror, he could see that the red car behind him had already caught up with him. However, this did not cause Chi-Yu to worry. The explosive acceleration of the MW 12-cylinder engine, coupled with the mechanical supercharge, was too strong. Whenever the car driven by the eighth sister of the second ring road approached Chi-Yu, as soon as it encountered a straight road, Chi-Yu suddenly accelerated, and the car could suddenly rush out, pulling away in the blink of an eye. Dozens of kilometers was not considered short, but with the way Chi-Yu and the others drove, the victory and defeat of the second ring road was indeed decided in a few short minutes. When the off-road car steadily stopped under the overpass, Chi-Yu glanced at the car's watch. A full 8 minutes, not a second more, not a second less. Faint smoke rose up from the car's surroundings. The brakes were already smoking because of the high heat caused by Chi-Yu's rampage. Fortunately, the brake pads of Jida's car were made of special ceramic, so there was no heat exhaustion. It should be known that the weight of this off-road car reached an astonishing 3 tons. To brake suddenly required a very large force, especially in the case of high speed. When Chi-Yu jumped out of the car again, Jida couldn't wait to return to the driver's seat. He swore in his heart that no matter what Chi-Yu said in the future, he would never lend the car to this lunatic again. With his feet on the ground, Chi-Yu's legs were a little weak, and his body slightly swayed. Only then did he walk to the side of the road, lit a cigarette again, and smoked hard to calm his raging heartbeat. He was gasping for air. Although it was only 8 minutes, the high mental tension made him consume a lot of energy. By the time Chi-Yu took his first puff, the red car had already returned. A few minutes later, over 10 cars arrived one after another. This time, Jida finally saw it clearly. Chi-Yu actually took a stack of money from each of them. The expressions of those people when they looked at the off-road car were no longer contemptuous, but full of shock. He didn't know why, but at this time, the blood in Jida's body was constantly boiling. He wished that he was the one who was racing just now. Chi-Yu consciously got into the car from the front passenger seat. Before he could steady himself, Ming Ming had already grabbed his ear and said angrily, "Chi-Yu, give me an explanation. You actually used my brother's car to gamble?" Surprisingly, Chi-Yu didn't resist, and his face was full of satisfaction. "That's great, Ming Ming, don't you think it's great?" Ming Ming's face alternated between green and white. She suddenly pushed open the door beside her, jumped out of the car and vomited. She almost threw up everything she had eaten that night. If she didn't have the physique of a Zodiac warrior, she probably wouldn't have been able to endure until now. The probability of a girl getting carsick was very high, not to mention such a crazy car race. "Ming Ming, are you okay?" Chi-Yu patted Ming Ming's back with concern. "Wow!" Ming Ming spat out and glared at Chi-Yu. "If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, you're dead meat." Chiyu touched his nose and said, "You heard it too. That female Tyrannosaurus Hyrule said that she would only give me a job during the winter break. With my current appetite, I'm afraid I'll starve to death by then. How can I not think of a way to earn some money?" It turned out that before the race started, he had bet all of his remaining 2,000 yuan. Because of the prestige of the second ring 8 sister, he received a ratio of 1 to 10. This time, he made a lot of money. Ming Ming took the tissue from Jida and wiped her mouth. "Didn't I tell you that I'll pay for your food first? Can't you pay me back later?" Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, "If I can make a living with my own ability, I will never rely on a woman. I'm a man. Jida, I'm sorry for ravaging your precious car, but I promise that this is the first and last time. When I have a job in the future, I won't play this game anymore. This is the last time I race." Using this kind of situation to bid farewell to this place that used to make me yearn for my dreams can be considered a good ending. Maybe you guys don't know, but this used to be my favorite place. I used to come here every day. Even if I couldn't drive, just watching them race was a kind of enjoyment. But now, I don't have the right to enjoy these things anymore. Speaking up to this point, he took a deep puff of his cigarette. His eyes revealed a faint trace of sadness, just like when he first walked out of the villa. Ming Ming's heart softened. She shook her head helplessly and said, "I hope you remember what you said. This is the last time." Chiyu looked at Ming Ming and said, "I rarely make promises. I'm a hooligan, a ruffian, but I'm not a person who goes back on his word." After saying this, he threw the cigarette butt on the ground and used his foot to twist it. Then, he went back to Jida's car. Only when he completely said goodbye to the old could he become a new Chiyu. Until today, Chiyu had completely integrated himself into the king of the Zodiac, the inheritor of Kirin. His personality hadn't changed, but his original personality had gained a feeling that he had never felt before, and that was responsibility. He had to be responsible for himself. He had to be responsible for the noble bloodline of Kirin that had been passed down. After returning to Qingbei University, Jida bade farewell to Chiyu and Ming Ming. He threw a Chunghwa cigarette to Chiyu. Chiyu didn't refuse, because he saw from Jida's eyes that Vol had looked at him. That was the exchange of glances between brothers. Brothers don't need to thank each other. Ming Ming found it strange that the moment the Chunghwa cigarette entered Chiyu's hand, it suddenly disappeared. She didn't know where he kept it. Qingbei University seemed very quiet at night. Although the school's gate was already closed, it wasn't difficult for Ming Ming to bring Chiyu over the wall with her strength. The weather in October already had a slight taste of winter. A light breeze blew, bringing a burst of cool air. Chiyu stretched his waist and took in big mouthfuls of fresh air. So refreshing. Ming Ming, don't you think so? Ming Ming appeared to be very refined. She followed beside Chiyu and walked beside the lake in Qingbei University's campus, enjoying the rare tranquility. "It is very comfortable. It's a pity that I have to leave tomorrow. When I return, the greenery here has already withered." Chiyu said with a smile, "Did you read too many romance novels? In my eyes, Ming Ming is a lively girl. Don't be so sentimental. I won't be used to it." Ming Ming glared at Chiyu and said, "There's no atmosphere at all. You are just a ruffian." Chiyu revealed a lecherous look. He looked at Ming Ming's slender thighs and said, "How can there be atmosphere here? It can only be in the room. Ming Ming, you can't have fallen for me, right?" Ming Ming's face turned red. She said snappily, "You might as well go and die. I like pigs, but I won't like a ruffian like you." Chiyu pretended to be surprised. "Oh my God! Turns out that our beautiful Ming Ming actually likes pigs. So it's like this. Then I have no chance." Chapter 24. Chiyu was stunned for a moment, and his smile became a little forced. "How have I changed? Have I changed for the better or worse?" Ming Ming shook her head and said, "I can't say for sure, but I feel that you're no longer the ruffian you used to be. Although you still look at pretty girls lecherously, something in your bones has changed a little. Really? Why don't I feel that? Could it be that I've become less lecherous recently? Hee hee, Ming Ming, do you want me to prove it to you? As he said that, he made a standard breast-grabbing dragon claw and made a posture of pouncing on Ming Ming. Can you be more serious? Ming Ming glared at Chiyu and really wanted to kick him into the lake. Chiyu felt wronged and said, "How can I be serious when I walk with such a beautiful girl like you? Have you heard of a joke? A man and a woman were in the same room in the middle of the night. The man slept with the woman, and the next day, the woman called him a beast and ran away crying." Ming Ming blushed and said, "What the hell? It's so unpleasant." Chiyu laughed and said, "Again, they had another chance to be in the same room. This time, the man was well behaved and didn't touch the woman. As a result, the next morning, the woman scolded him again. She ran away crying. Guess what she scolded?" Ming Ming was stunned and said, "How would I know?" Chiyu laughed and said, "That woman said that you're worse than a beast." Ming Ming was stunned at first, but then she understood what Chiyu meant. She raised her leg and kicked Chiyu's but shyly. "Go to hell." Chiyu laughed. Ming Ming naturally didn't use any strength in that kick. He ran forward and said, "Under this beautiful scenery, I'm in a poetic mood." He couldn't help but want to write a poem. The name of the poem is The Story of Ming Ming and the Pig. "How dare you!" Ming Ming angrily chased after Chiyu. Chiyu ran around a few trees and joked, "Why not? Listen, the moonlight of the lotus pond floats on the water." Piglet hugged Ming Ming's waist. It was clearly a flick of the leg, a piggy on the waist, f***ck sex. She murdered her husband. Plop. Chiyu was finally kicked into the ice-cold lake by Ming Ming, who had caught up to him, under the influence of his perverted mouth. A few bubbles appeared on the surface of the water. After Chiyu's last cry of surprise, there wasn't even a struggle before there was no sound. Ming Ming was blushing from Chiyu's poem, but her expression changed immediately. She cried out, "Doesn't he know how to swim?" Almost without any hesitation, she immediately jumped down. The lake water was ice-cold and clear. After jumping into the lake, Ming Ming couldn't help but shiver. But she couldn't care about this anymore. She immediately searched for Chiyu in the lake water. Under the combination of embarrassment and anxiety, she was already a little flustered. Suddenly, a pair of big hands hugged Ming Ming's waist from behind. Just as Ming Ming was about to dive down again, she felt a gust of hot air beside her ear. "So you care about me so much?" This joking voice came from Chiyu. "You quickly let go of me." Although Ming Ming was startled, her nervous mood immediately relaxed. "I'm not letting go. It wasn't easy to find a chance. Who asked you to kick me down? Don't you think that my poem was very good? It's so rhyming." "You're so annoying. Go and die. How can your crooked poem rhyme?" As Ming Ming spoke, she struggled. But she didn't know why. Maybe it was because of the coldness of the water. Leaning against Chiyu's embrace gave her a warm and safe feeling. Her struggle also became symbolic. Chiyu gently moved his waist and repeated his poem. "I realize that being a pig isn't bad. Ming Ming swings her leg, the pig pushes against my waist, I..." Before he could say the word fuck, his mouth was covered by Ming Ming, who turned around. It was autumn now. The two of them didn't have many clothes on. When Ming Ming turned around, because she was hugged by Chiyu, her plump upper body immediately pressed against his chest. Their eyes met under the bright moonlight. Ming Ming's gaze seemed to be a little flustered. But when she saw Chiyu's clear gaze, she was a little stunned. The two of them just looked at each other, as if they had forgotten about time. "Why aren't you going up?" When Ming Ming felt that her lower abdomen was pressed against by something, she suddenly woke up from her daze. She hurriedly pushed Chiyu away, and went up to the shore as if she was escaping. Chiyu soaked in the cold lake water. He smelled the faint fragrance. He thought to himself that it felt so good to hug a beauty. Unfortunately, such an opportunity might not come again in the future. Ming Ming went up to the shore. Fortunately, she was wearing trousers today, so something more embarrassing did not happen. She sat on a rock by the lake and hugged her curvy chest. Her heartbeat kept rising, and even her ears were blushing. Even if you haven't eaten pork, you must have seen a pig run. You could imagine what was below just now. It was the first time that Ming Ming was so intimate with a man. At this time, Ming Ming couldn't help but think of Qi Yu's joke. If he insisted on not letting go of her, or if he violated her, what would she do? Although it was close contact, that ruffian just hugged her and did not do anything improper. Could it be that he was worse than a beast in the joke? Oh my God! Ji Ming Ming, what are you thinking in your head? With a splash, Qi Yu also got out of the water and sat next to Ming Ming. He reached out to take off his shirt and twisted it hard, making a sound of water. Ming Ming's position happened to see Qi Yu's back. Perhaps because of the excitement of his body just now, the black and silver Kirin pattern had clearly appeared on his body. It was a perfect pattern. Even if it was just a tattoo, it was definitely the best work of art. Looking at Qi Yu's body that seemed to have become stronger, as well as the black and silver Qilin pattern, Ming Ming's consciousness couldn't help but become a little hazy. Especially the purple, blue, red, and green necklace around his neck, it seemed to add a bit of a noble aura. Ming Ming, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Qi Yu put the clothes that he wrung dry on his shoulder. He asked tentatively. Previously, when he was kicked into the lake by Ming Ming, he held his breath because it was fun. He deliberately sank into the lake to see how Ming Ming would react. But he never expected that Ming Ming would not hesitate at all and immediately jump into the cold lake. At that moment, in Qi Yu's eyes, Ming Ming had become a holy fairy. From her, Qi Yu felt the feeling of family. That was why he threw away the concept of status in his heart and hugged Ming Ming. He didn't intend to violate Ming Ming. He just felt comfortable hugging her at that time. Not only was it comfortable physically, but more importantly, it came from his heart. Ming Ming glanced at Qi Yu but didn't say anything. Her body trembled slightly. Ah, I just entered the water. If the wind blows on me again, I'll get cold. Let's go back to the dormitory. Qi Yu also felt a little cold. Ming Ming lowered her head and said, How can we go back like this? If Qing'er and Sister Yun see this, what will they think? But the wind is blowing here. You'll catch a cold. You still have to go to St. Buddha Temple tomorrow. It's all my fault. Qi Yu was a little embarrassed and turned around on the spot. He wanted to put his clothes on Ming Ming, but the clothes in his hands were also wet. He was afraid that it wouldn't be effective. Ming Ming was still sitting there with her legs in front of her chest and her hands around her knees. She lowered her head and said nothing. However, the trembling of her body became even more obvious. She didn't know why, but at this time, Ming Ming didn't want to use the ascending cloud incantation to get rid of the cold. It seemed that this cold feeling could make her heart calmer and clearer. Just when Ming Ming felt the cold rising and didn't know what to do, suddenly, two bronze-colored arms wrapped around her from behind. A warm feeling came from outside the cold cloth on her back. Her petite body entered a warm embrace. The pair of outstretched arms wrapped around her hand, bringing her closer to the warmth of the chest. The original cold suddenly decreased a lot. The constant warmth was only separated by the thin cloth on her body. It made Ming Ming's calmed heart beat even more violently than before. Like this, you shouldn't feel cold. Let's go back after your clothes are dry. Now that there are fewer clothes, it will be easier to dry. Qi Yu didn't mean to tease her. It seemed like he was talking about a very ordinary thing. The faint warmth kept coming. Qi Yu let go of the hand that was holding Ming Ming. He turned his wrist and a ball of fire lit up. It immediately brought some warmth to the front of them. It was the fire attribute Kirin Thundercloud Force that he had just recovered. Looking at the faint fire in front of her, Ming Ming suddenly felt the temperature on Qi Yu's chest increasing. A scorching stream of air directly entered her body. It made her feel so comfortable that she couldn't help but moan. What is on your chest? Chi-Yu smiled and said, "It is one of the 3 treasures of Kirin that I got today. It is called Kirin Red. It is on the chest of my Kirin pattern. It has a very strong fire attribute energy. It can emit heat just by slightly activating it. Do you feel warmer?" Not only did Ming Ming's body become warmer, but the thundercloud force in her body also seemed to be boiling under the stimulation of the heat. It kept circulating. The Kirin aura that was emitted from Chi-Yu's body kept seeping into her pores, causing the thundercloud force in her body to circulate. It was definitely a wonderful feeling. Compared to usual cultivation, the speed was much faster, and there was no need to deliberately control it. The ascending cloud technique that Ming Ming cultivated came from the same source as Chi-Yu's ascending Qilin technique. Under the effect of the Kirin aura, the ascending cloud technique could naturally play a greater role. Under such stimulation, Ming Ming's 6 senses continued to strengthen. She felt Chi-Yu's steady heartbeat and felt his breath on her shoulder. The two were only separated by a piece of cloth, but they were so intimately touching each other. A faint strange feeling kept rising. Chi-Yu also felt comfortable. The feeling of hugging a beautiful woman was wonderful, not to mention a beautiful woman like Ming Ming. It was something that he didn't even dare to think about before. He didn't know why, but after coming back from the Dragonfield courtyard, the inferiority he felt when facing Ming Ming had disappeared. Ming Ming didn't seem so unreachable anymore. Although he didn't think about his relationship with Ming Ming, hugging Ming Ming's delicate body like this was indeed a very comfortable thing. "Who is it?" While Chi-Yu was intoxicated, Ming Ming suddenly shouted. A cold light flashed in her eyes as she looked to the other side of the lake. Chi-Yu also subconsciously looked in that direction, but he only saw a patch of darkness. There was no one there. Ming Ming struggled out of Chi-Yu's embrace. Her originally short black hair had 2 strands of red hair. Her eyes flashed and she let out a sharp sound. The sound was condensed and didn't dissipate. It was like a sharp needle piercing in a direction. Qingbei University was still silent. Ming Ming's eyes revealed a trace of doubt. Chi-Yu stood beside her and said in a low voice, "What's wrong?" "Ming Ming." Ming Ming's eyes flashed with a cold light. It seemed like someone was looking at us. Although he hid his aura very well, I'm a chicken Zodiac. I have a very strong sense of aura. When you released the flame from your hand, I clearly felt a trace of aura fluctuation. If it wasn't like that, I wouldn't have been able to sense his existence. This is an expert. He hid very well and ran very fast. Chi-Yu, you better come with us to St. Buddha Temple. Perhaps this person is coming for you. Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "No, I'm not going with you. It's useless even if I go. In any case, in the eyes of Hyrule, I'm also a trash." Ming Ming turned around and looked at Chi-Yu, who was still naked. Her eyes revealed a trace of complicated emotions. "Don't undervalue yourself. I believe that you will become stronger. Let's go back. I don't feel safe here. If you're really being targeted by someone, then we definitely can't leave you alone in Qingbei." Facing Chi-Yu, she saw the red scale on Chi-Yu's chest. To be precise, the location of the scale was between Chi-Yu's chest and abdomen. It was the chest area of the Kirin pattern. The sparkling and translucent red light was burning like a fire. It was very clear in the dark night. Chi-Yu opened his arms to hug. Ming Ming hurriedly stretched out her hands to block Chi-Yu's chest. "Don't. What are you doing?" Chi-Yu said with a calm face. "It's not like I haven't hugged before. I'm just helping you to keep warm." Ming Ming snorted unhappily. "You ruffian only know how to bully me. Go back." Saying that, she gently pushed Chi-Yu away and quickly walked towards the dormitory. "Ming Ming, you're not really angry, are you?" Chi-Yu hurriedly chased after her and followed Ming Ming back to the dormitory. When their figures gradually disappeared into the darkness, a faint black shadow appeared at the place where Ming Ming was looking at. Because it was in the shadow, it was impossible to see his appearance. A deliberately suppressed voice sounded. "He appeared. He really appeared. What should I do? I actually met him here. Could it be that this is the beginning of another fate? The black shadow flashed and floated away at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. When his figure passed through the moonlight, it revealed a fiery red light. Ming Ming and Chi Yu quietly returned to the dormitory. As soon as they entered the door, Ming Ming went straight back to her room. Chi Yu didn't go looking for trouble and also went back to his room. Closing the door behind him, he subconsciously touched the Kirin pearl on his chest. A faint feeling of energy spread out. Chi Yu's eyes once again revealed sadness. The first thing he took out was the Chunghwa cigarette that Jida gave him, followed by the money he won from racing. Finally, the dark red cloak Kirin Invisibility. He carefully wore Kirin Invisibility on his body, covering every part of his body. Kirin Invisibility seemed to be specially made for him, the length just covered his feet. The symbol of the Kirin clan, Kirin's 8 treasures, appeared. Chi Yu knew that for him, the 3 Kirin treasures that he obtained today were too important. The 3 Qilin treasures he had obtained today were simply too important. With them, his strength would definitely increase by a large margin. Of course, this would also be established on the basis of continuous cultivation. Stroking the radiant Kirin Invisibility, Chi Yu couldn't help but think of Ming Ming. Was his joke today a little too much? After all, Ming Ming only regarded him as a friend. Tomorrow they would go to St. Buddha Temple. No one could predict what would happen in 3 months. He hoped that they would have a safe journey. At this point, Chi Yu suddenly thought of Vol and hurriedly picked up the phone on the table. He quickly picked up the phone on the table and dialed Vol's number. The phone rang for a long time before it was connected. Vol's hazy voice was full of sleepiness. "Who is it? It's so late, is there something wrong with you?" Chi Yu said in a low voice, "Rat, it's me." Hearing Chi Yu's voice, Vol suddenly woke up a little. "Boss, why are you calling me so late?" Chi Yu said, "Tomorrow, you may go to St. Buddha Temple together. I'm calling to remind you." "What? Tomorrow? Isn't it supposed to be winter vacation?" Vol was a little surprised. Chi Yu said, "They will tell you the reason tomorrow. Hai Ryue, that Tyrannosaurus Rex, has always been resourceful. Naturally, he will find a way to get you out. Rat, I'm just telling you that if you want to become stronger and get the woman you love, then you have to put in more effort than others. I think you understand it very well. Among the Zodiac Guardian Gods, you are the youngest and the weakest among the 6 Zodiac Guardian Gods that have appeared." Vol was silent for a while before he said, "Boss, I understand what you mean." After witnessing the battle between Modi and Ming Ming, coupled with Ming Ming's explanation, he also had a certain understanding of the special system of the Zodiac Guardian Gods. Chi Yu's meaning was clear. He was telling him that if he wanted to be with his beloved teacher Modi, then he must have enough strength. "Boss, I have been thinking about it these days. Do you think teacher Modi and I are suitable for each other? Do I have a chance?" Chi Yu was stunned for a moment. He deeply felt the helplessness in Vol's words. He said firmly, "Good brother, no matter what, I will stand by your side. Age is not a gap. As long as you put in your heart and work hard, I think you will succeed." Vol was a little emotional. "Boss, I think so too. I have seen many beautiful women, but none of them can make me yearn for them day and night like teacher Modi. I'm ugly and fat like a ball. I always have a feeling of inferiority in front of her. I really like her. What should I do?" Chi Yu thought for a moment and said, "This is a very good opportunity. This time, we will go to St. Buddha Temple for about 3 months. You must make good use of this time. I think, if a man wants to attract a woman's attention, he must first show his ability to surpass others. Therefore, as I said, work hard to practice the ascending cloud art and become a qualified zodiac warrior. This is the foundation of your success." "I understand. Boss, I will work hard. You also have to work hard. Sister Ming Ming is very good." Chi Yu was stunned for a moment. "Me and Ming Ming are just ordinary friends. There is really nothing between us." Vol laughed and said, As if I believe you. Boss, I don't know others, but don't I know you? A beauty like Sister Ming Ming is at least at the level of lament in your heart. If you don't make a move, you will not be yourself. Chi Yu said with a bitter smile, if I really meet a beauty of this level, it will not be as easy as you think. Vol said, Boss, no matter how difficult it is for you, it can't be more difficult than me chasing Teacher Modi. Even I have confidence, why don't you? Chi Yu said with a low smile, you don't understand this. My energy is limited. Now there are so many beauties, I can't give up the whole forest for a tree. I am a man of universal love. Well, you go to bed early. Tomorrow morning, Ming Ming will find you. After saying this, Chi Yu directly hung up the phone. In fact, Vol's last sentence touched him a lot. Yes. Even Vol can work hard for Modi, who is so far away from him. Why can't I go after Ming Ming? He shook his head hard. Forget it, these things are not important now. I will think about it when I have the ability to defend Kiran's dignity. Chi Yu has always been a person who can take it easy. Today, listening to Xieji's story of Kiran, he was greatly touched. He no longer felt sad because of emotional things. He took off his wet clothes, sat on the bed, and began another practice. The thundercloud force was obviously much more tangible than the aura. Last time when he tried to practice, Chi Yu could only feel the general path of his aura. This time, his thundercloud force had recovered on its own. The 4 colors of purple, blue, red, and cyan appeared very clearly in the blood vessels in his body. Every time it flowed, he could clearly see its trajectory. A warm feeling flowed in front of his chest. Every time the Kiran bead changed color, Chi Yu could feel an aura merging with the thundercloud force in his body. Under the stimulation of the Kiran bead, the speed of the 4-color thundercloud force's operation increased significantly. This was not the most surprising thing. What was more wonderful was that every time the thundercloud force operated, it would automatically absorb the molecular energy in the air through the pores. It could be clearly seen that the tiny light spots of the 4 colors were constantly combined with the thundercloud force in his body. Although there was no obvious strengthening of the thundercloud force, Chi Yu felt that this practice was obviously much stronger than when he first started practicing the Qilin Ascension technique. Gradually, Chi Yu was completely immersed in the wonderful process of practicing. In the situation of multitasking, on one hand, he practiced the thundercloud force, on the other hand, he was always paying attention to the changes of the Kiran bead and thinking about the Kiran skills that he barely remembered yesterday. He was not in a hurry to practice the Kiran stunt. Through his understanding of Kiran's ability, he knew that the thundercloud force was the foundation of everything. Without a powerful thundercloud force as a backing, any skill could not exert its original ability. Therefore, what he needed most now was to make his thundercloud force stronger. Cultivation often sped up time. By the time Chi Yu awoke from his meditative state, it was already the next morning. He moved his energetic body, changed into clean clothes, and walked out of the room. As soon as he went out, Chi Yu found that he was late. There was breakfast on the table in the hall, but there was no one in the dormitory. Perhaps it was to avoid Chi Yu, but Ming Ming had left long ago. Su Qing and Xin Yun had classes in the morning, so they also left. Chi Yu thought that since he was already late, he might as well not go to class today. Anyway, the university's management was not strict. With his homework foundation, he was afraid that no matter how hard he worked, he would not be able to learn anything. After eating breakfast, he lit a cigarette for himself and took a few deep puffs. There was an indescribable feeling of relaxation. He walked to the window of the dormitory and looked out. At this time, Qingbei University was very quiet. Most of the students had gone to class, and there were only a few students who had no classes walking around in the dormitory area. Fresh air came from the open window, blowing Chi Yu's somewhat messy long hair. Chi Yu looked at his naked upper body. He discovered that the muscles on his body seemed to have some lines, and his movements seemed to have more power. With the Kirin pearl on his neck, his cultivation was clearly much faster. Moreover, it seemed that the cultivation technique he practiced had also changed. It was a change in essence. As for what the Kirin pearl could bring, it would need time to verify. Just as he finished smoking the cigarette in his hand, his phone rang. "Grandpa, grandson has a call." Hearing this strange ringtone, Chi-Yu could not help but reveal a trace of a smile, and hurriedly returned to his room to pick up his phone. "Who is it?" "Chi-Yu, it's me." Although the cold voice came from the phone, it still could not help but make Chi-Yu shiver. Other than T-Rex, there was no one who could make him feel this way. "What? T-Rex?" Chi-Yu asked lazily. Hai Ryue said slightly angrily. "I have a name. Next time I hear you call me that, I'll smash your mouth." Chi-Yu frowned and moved the phone away from his ear. "Enough, don't throw your tyrannical temper at me. If you have something to say, quickly say it." Hai Ryue said. "Ming Ming and the other 3 have already left, and I have also informed Master Zagru. I heard from Ming Ming that there seem to be some unstable factors in the Qing Bay region. Come out of the school now, I'll pick you up at the school gate, and bring you to see someone." Chi-Yu stared blankly and said, "See who?" Hai Ryue said coldly. "Ming Ming has left and there must be someone to protect you. He is the most suitable candidate. He is the tiger that you have not seen yet." "Tiger? All right, I'll come out immediately." Towards a Zodiac guardian warrior that he had not seen before, Chi-Yu immediately became interested. How good would it be if this was also a beauty? I hope it's not a tigress. Chapter 25. Hai Ryue had always been swift and decisive. When Chi-Yu arrived at the school gate, she was already waiting in the top sports car. Chi-Yu directly got into the passenger seat. Hai Ryue did not say anything. With a roar of the accelerator, the Lamborghini Batmobile sped out. The momentary feeling reminded Chi-Yu of the scene when he was racing yesterday. The car was heading for the inner city. As the traffic increased, Hai Ryue had to slow down. Chi-Yu could not help but ask, "That Bao no Ryue, is Tiger a man or a woman? Was she also a great beauty? Is it a tigress?" Hai Ryue glanced at him and said briefly, "It's a man." Chi-Yu could not help but feel a little disappointed. "It's a man. Boring." Tigers were known for their ferocity. The Zodiac guardian tiger was probably even fiercer than Jida. At the thought of meeting a strong man, he could not help but feel a little bored. About 20 minutes later, Hai Ryue stopped in front of a 5-star hotel. "What are you doing here?" Chi-Yu asked as he followed Hai Ryue out of the car. Hai Ryue said, "He lives here." "Of course he is here. Tiger is not from the capital. He is originally from the south. Yesterday, because he received the notice of the exchange meeting, I specially called him to come here by plane." As she spoke, the two of them had already entered the 5-star hotel. This was the first time that Chi-Yu had come to such a high-end hotel. He could not help looking around, especially paying attention to the gap above the thighs of the waiters. For a moment, his eyes were full of lust. Fortunately, there was Hai Ryue next to him. He still had some sense of propriety, and did not make any sound of swallowing saliva. Hai Ryue took Chi-Yu to a cafe on the side of the hotel lobby. He found a quiet corner and sat down. He took out a small mobile phone from his handbag and dialed a number. "We're here. You can come down now." After saying that, he didn't even seem to hear the other party's reply. He hung up the phone. "2 glasses of Blue Mountain," Hai Ryue said to the waiter. "Chi-Yu, how do you know if I drink this?" Hai Ryue looked at him coldly and did not answer. Chi-Yu said, "Fine. Blue Mountain it is. I've never drunk it anyway." "Right. Ryue, what is the identity of this Zodiac tiger warrior? What abilities does he have?" Hai Ryue looked at him and said, "The full power of each Zodiac warrior." They were the only ones who knew. The tiger's name was Su Dong. He was the current successor of the Su family in Jiangsu province. At the age of 21, He received a double master's degree in finance and foreign trade. After finishing his studies, he did not return to his family to work. Instead, he traveled around the world. Accomplishing nothing, these 3 words were enough to describe him. What 3 words? Ryu looked behind Chi-Yu and said, "Prodigal." Chi-Yu's curiosity was piqued again. If the tiger was a very orthodox person, he would feel awkward. But after hearing Ryu's introduction, he felt like a bosom friend. Anyway, they were not good people. A ruffian and a prodigal, it was a good combination. "Ryu, long time no see. You don't have to insult me in front of our boss, right? No matter what, I'm still a handsome guy." A voice came from behind Chi-Yu. Hearing this voice, Chi-Yu could not help but be stunned. It was not as loud or deep as he had imagined. This voice sounded a little soft. It was very pleasant to listen to. There was a hint of laziness and elegance in the voice. He could not help but turn around to look. A man who was about the same height as Chi-Yu walked to the seat beside them and sat down. He had a pair of big bright eyes and looked about 26 or 27 years old. His eyebrows were very thick and he looked very energetic. What caught Chi-Yu's attention the most was that he had a pair of sideburns, which made him look more elegant. A well-ironed suit and a harmless smile. No matter who saw this handsome face, their first impression would be very good. The sideburns man extended his right hand to Chi-Yu and said, "Hello, I'm Su-dong." Chi-Yu shook hands with Su-dong and looked at Ryu in confusion. "He is the tiger?" Su-dong smiled and said in his soft voice, "Why? Do I not look like him?" Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "It's different from what I imagined. Don't you represent the tiger? The tiger should be very domineering, the kind with the aura of a king. But why do I feel like you are a sissy?" The muscles on Su-dong's face twitched a little, but he still maintained his smile and said, "Maybe. But I feel that a man's aura of a king should be placed in bed. That is the best time to show it. My motto is, who said that a sissy can't be lewd? Don't you think so, Big Brother Kirin?" Chi-Yu was stunned for a moment. Then, he grabbed Su-dong's hand again and said with a trembling voice, "Great minds think alike." From his first impression, this Zodiac tiger warrior with sideburns gave him a much better feeling than Ryu. Just his elegant aura without any arrogance gave Chi-Yu a good impression. Ryu snorted disdainfully and said, "The two of you are a perfect match. Wastrel and ruffian. Tiger, I've brought him here. From now on, the task of protecting him will be handed over to you until the end of the conference. I've already told you clearly on the phone yesterday. This conference can only rely on you, me, and Ming Ming. I think you know what to do." Su-dong smiled and said, "Isn't it enough to have you, the White Dragon, as the host? Don't forget, our Zodiac guardian god has a history that no other family can compare to. Have you solved the problem of my identity?" Ryu took out a small wallet from her bag and threw it to him. "The information is all in there. With your knowledge, it shouldn't be a problem for you to be an assistant teacher. Teach finance. Remember, protecting Chi-Yu is your most important responsibility. Don't put your mind on things that shouldn't be." Su-dong acted as if he didn't hear Ryu's words. His face revealed a smile that Chi-Yu was very familiar with. "That's right, being a teacher has an innate advantage." Ryu seemed to understand the meaning behind his words and said angrily, "Did you hear what I said? A wastrel like you. Sooner or later, you will die on a woman's belly." Su-dong maintained his elegant smile. "If that's the case, I wonder," as he said that. His eyes quickly swept over Ryu's flat stomach. Ryu's eyes flashed coldly. With a flick of her wrist, the spoon that was used to stir the coffee flew out without warning. Because it was too fast, it actually left a faint afterimage in the air. Su-dong unhurriedly stretched out his right hand and caught the spoon. Smiling, he said, "Don't be like this. Ryu, if you are willing to marry me, even if I have to live 10 years less, I'm willing." Ryu snorted coldly. Don't treat me as your girlfriend team that never has less than 50 people. Be careful that one day I will castrate you. You guys go back. I'm leaving first. Saying that, she picked up her bag and stood up. She didn't even take a sip of the Blue Mountain coffee. Looking at Hai Ryue's back as she left, Su Dong and Chi Yu did the same. Their eyes stared fiercely at Hai Ryue's perfect buttock. Okay, she's gone. It's so much better now. This Tyrannosaurus Rex. She doesn't even know how to change her temper. If anyone really marries her, I'm afraid that he will really live 10 years less. No, it should be immediate death. Using an elegant voice to say malicious words, Su Dong did not lose his composure at all. Chi Yu couldn't help but admire him. Brother Su, I'll call you that from now on. Just now Ryue said that you have a girlfriend team that never has less than 50 people. Is that true? Su Dong smiled and said, Kirin. Of course it's fake. It's not as exaggerated as she said. Chi Yu let out a long sigh and said, I think so too. How can anyone have 50 girlfriends? Su Dong's eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. Now there are only 49. I was just preparing to add 50. But I've been too busy lately. I really don't have the time. Chi Yu spat out the coffee he just drank. Oh my god. Su Dong looked around to make sure no one was paying attention. He said in a low voice, Kirin, don't forget that I'm In Hu. The tiger of the Zodiac has always been known as the Playboy warrior. Don't you know that? Chi Yu was stunned. Lecherous tiger? No wonder. Well, Brother Su, can you teach your little brother a few moves? I don't even have a girlfriend right now. Su Dong smiled and said, This kind of thing can only be encountered by chance. But, when there's an opportunity, you must grasp it. Especially when you meet a top-quality beauty, you can't let go of any opportunity. Oh, speaking of an opportunity has come. Chi Yu followed his gaze and saw a woman walking in from outside the hotel. She was heading in the direction of the cafe. It seemed like she was waiting for someone. Chi Yu couldn't help but be somewhat dazed at the sight of this girl as a sense of familiarity rose within him. At this time, Su Dong had already stood up. He gave Chi Yu a look and walked over to the woman. At this time, the woman had already sat down at a seat by the window. Her eyes were looking out of the hotel. Chi Yu couldn't help but find it funny when he saw Su Dong sitting down opposite the woman. Because there was some distance between them, he couldn't hear what the two were talking about. Su Dong displayed his usual elegant manner and seemed to be happily chatting with the woman. After about 5 minutes, he stood up and took out a business card from his suit pocket and handed it to the woman. Only then did he return to Chi Yu's side. Do you know her? Chi Yu didn't wait for Su Dong to sit down and asked curiously. Su Dong smiled and said, Of course I don't know her. That's the standard. Look at how good her skin is. Her appearance and figure are all top-notch. She's definitely the best. I've already given her my business card. But this girl seems very pure. I've been talking to her for a long time, but I couldn't get her name out. It's really strange. Chi Yu asked curiously, Then how did you talk to her? Su Dong smiled and said, There are many methods. It's very simple. For example, pretend to recognize the wrong person or ask for the time, or pretend to have an identity. All of these can be easily approached. As for how to perform, it depends on the standard. Fortunately, I should have given her a good impression. If there's enough time, I have 50% confidence. It's a pity that I'm going to Qingbei with you. I hope your Qingbei University also has such a top quality. This time, Chi Yu revealed a smile on his face. Brother Su, it seems that your standard is still not good enough. It's easy to ask for the name of this top quality. I can even ask for her phone number and hold her hand. Do you believe it? Su Dong seemed to have gotten to know this Kirin, who didn't have an outstanding appearance. Oh? I didn't expect that you're also an expert. Then I'll have to see. If you can do it, I'll treat you to a feast. How about it? Chi Yu smiled mischievously and said, All right, it's settled then. But, if we're going to have a feast, I still need to bring 2 people. Sudong nodded and said, That's easy. Brother, go quickly. When I asked her just now, she said that the person she was waiting for seemed to be coming. You don't have much time. Chi-yu stood up confidently, smiled faintly, and walked towards the girl. Sudong looked at Chi-yu. He really couldn't believe that Kirin, who was obviously inferior to him in terms of appearance and behavior, could do something that even he couldn't do? Could it be that he wanted to force himself on her? That would go against the basic principles of the Casanova clan. There's nothing wrong with picking up a younger sister, but the key is to make the other party willing. Just when Sudong was worried whether Chi-yu would force himself on her, Chi-yu had already walked to the place where he was previously sitting and sat down. The girl raised her head and looked at Chi-yu. At first, she was stunned, but then, a sweet smile immediately appeared on her face. That was the smile that Sudong had used several gentle methods to not see before. It was a smile that came from the heart. Then, what made Sudong dumbfounded was that Chi-yu actually chatted with the girl. The way the two talked was actually a bit intimate, as if they already knew each other. In the meantime, Chi-yu touched the girl's hand a few times, as if it was unintentional. The girl's pretty face just blushed, but she didn't refuse. It can't be. Sudong's face revealed a trace of a bitter smile. Could it be that I really met a legendary super expert? Has he already reached a realm that is not based on appearance and temperament? This has to be properly explored. In fact, with Chi-yu's standard of picking up girls, it was unknown how many levels lower than Sudong's. Unfortunately, this time Sudong's luck was really not good. This exquisite beauty who had just come in from the outside, Chi-yu really did know her. Although they had only met once, it was enough. This girl was the beautiful medical student, Shuei-yu, that Chi-yu met on his trip to Tibet. At that time, Shuei-yu was the first person to see the Kirin pattern on Chi-yu's body. I really didn't expect to meet you here. Chi-yu, how are you? Shuei-yu looked at Chi-yu with a smile. Chi-yu suddenly appeared in front of her, which really shocked her. The current Chi-yu was obviously different from the last time. Compared to that time, he looked a lot more energetic, and the clothes on his body were no longer dirty. You could even smell the fresh air. Chi-yu chuckled and said, I also didn't expect to see you here. Shuei-yu, when did you come back from Tibet? Shuei-yu smiled and said, I should have come back before school started, but who knew that there would suddenly be a small plague in Tibet, so I stayed for a period of time. I just came back a few days ago, and I didn't expect to meet you here. Chi-yu said, This proves that we are fated. You really are an angel in white. I still remember the last time you slapped me, it actually directly knocked me out. I don't know if I was too weak or if your hands are too strong. As he said that, Chi-yu grabbed Shuei-yu's small hand that was on the table and looked like he was carefully observing it. Shuei-yu's pretty face turned slightly red, and she gently twitched and said, Don't be like this. Last time you were too weak. Now it's okay, right? What are you doing? Are you still working on your nude art creation? Chi-yu glanced at the dumbfounded Sudong in the distance. He knew that his goal had already been achieved. He hurriedly stopped while he was ahead, and let go of Shuei-yu's soft hand. He said, Yes. I'm still working. How about it? Are you interested in being a model for me? When Shuei-yu heard this, she couldn't help but think of what Chi-yu said about creating nude art. Her pretty face couldn't help but turn even redder. She stuck out her cute little tongue and said, No, if my father finds out, I'm afraid he'll beat me to death. Chi-yu looked at her cute appearance and couldn't help but be a bit silly. How could that be? Who would bear to beat a girl as cute as an angel like you? You aren't you going to introduce me? A low voice sounded. Chi-yu and Shuei-yu looked at the same time, and saw a man wearing casual clothes come to their table. This man looked to be in his 40s. His appearance was resolute, especially his gaze, which actually had a bit of a metallic texture. Meeting his gaze, Chi-yu instantly felt the thundercloud force in his body fluctuate slightly. His gaze appeared to be absent-minded for a moment, but quickly returned to normal. Shui Yu stood up and affectionately held the middle-aged man's arm, saying, "Father, you've finally come. You just came back from abroad, why didn't you go home to stay, and instead ran to a hotel?" The middle-aged man lovingly patted his daughter's hand and said with a smile, "It's not that father doesn't want to go back. There's no other way. This time there are a few foreign experts who came back with me. I have to first make arrangements for them, and then I'll go back with you. I'm afraid your mother will nag me again." His voice wasn't as cold as his appearance, and seemed very kind, giving people a feeling of familiarity. "Hello, uncle, I'm called Chi Yu." When Chi Yu heard that it was Shui Yu's father, he hurriedly stood up. Although Shui Yu's father was slightly shorter than him, for some reason, Chi Yu felt that his figure was abnormally tall. That was a kind of invisible aura. The middle-aged man nodded to Chi Yu, and looked at his daughter with some doubt. Shui Yu hurriedly explained, "Father, this Mr. Chi Yu is in the arts industry. The last time I was in the same car as him on the way to Tibet, I didn't expect to coincidentally meet him here today." Chi Yu smiled, saying, "That's right. Miss Shui Yu and I are really fated. However, I'm no longer simply creating now. In order to have more creative knowledge, I've recently been studying at a school." In front of Shui Yu's father, Chi Yu deliberately restrained his rascally appearance. The clothes he wore were all branded by Hairyu. Although his appearance wasn't considered outstanding, his tall and straight figure, cheerful smile, and restrained gaze made it easy for people to have a good impression of him. As expected, the middle-aged man smiled, saying, "It's a good thing for young people to learn more things. May I know which school you're in? Don't tell me you're in the same school as my daughter." When the middle-aged man finished speaking, Chi Yu suddenly discovered that a faint cold light flashed in the depths of the middle-aged man's benevolent expression. Chi Yu felt strange in his heart. He didn't discover that because he was cultivating the Qilin Ascension art, his senses had already become a lot sharper. "No, I'm not studying medicine. I'm currently studying at Qingbei University's philosophy department." "Oh, so it's like that." The trace of coldness in the middle-aged man's eyes very naturally disappeared. "I'm called Shui Yin. If there's a chance in the future, you're welcome to visit our house. Let's go. If we don't go home, I'm afraid your mother will really get angry." Shui Yu smiled slightly and said to Chi Yu, "Then we'll go first. If it's really like you said, maybe we'll meet again." Chi Yu nodded, saying, "We definitely will. Uncle, Miss Shui Yu, take care." Watching Shui Yu father and daughter leave, Chi Yu retracted his gaze. What attracted him the most about Shui Yu was the feeling of being as kind as water. Even a ruffian like him wasn't willing to blaspheme this kind-hearted little girl. "Alright, stop looking. I didn't expect brother's level to be so high. Looks like I really showed off." Without knowing when, Su Dong had already arrived at Chi Yu's side. His expression was a bit gloomier than before. Chi Yu laughed, saying, "Brother Su, remember that you owe me a meal. This girl is called Shui Yu. That was her father just now. She's called Shui Yin. How about it, did I get the name?" "Shui Yin? This name is very familiar." Su Dong revealed a pondering gaze. Chi Yu said, "Both father and daughter are studying medicine. Miss Shui Yu is indeed like a white-robed angel." "Studying medicine? Shui Yin. Ah, I remember now. It's actually Professor Shui Yin. He really met a benefactor when he went out?" "Chi Yu, this Professor Shui Yin is not an ordinary person. He is a first-rate genetic researcher in our Yanhuang Republic. He has made great contributions to the country in medicine. He is one of the most outstanding medical scientists in our Yanhuang Republic. No wonder his name was so familiar. I didn't expect to meet him here." Chi Yu said in surprise. "That powerful? Genetic inheritance? Why do I remember Shui Yu saying that she studied Chinese medicine?" Su Dong said, "That's right. Professor Shui Yin has always advocated the combination of Chinese and Western medicine. He himself is a Chinese medicine practitioner, so it's normal for his daughter to study Chinese medicine. Moreover, don't you feel that Professor Shui Yin is a hidden expert? Chi Yu shook his head. I didn't notice that. I'm not as strong as you guys. Although he could feel that Professor Shui Yin's aura was not ordinary, it was only a hazy feeling. Su Dong said, the energy fluctuations on this Shui Yin fighter's body are very strong, especially when you were talking to him just now. The energy fluctuations on his body were even more obvious, otherwise I wouldn't be so sure. It seems that this medical scientist is not an ordinary person. However, this has nothing to do with us. If you can have a good relationship with his daughter, it would be a good thing. Professor Shui Yin's medical skills are very famous. In the future, if our Zodiac warriors are injured, looking for him will definitely be the right choice. Looks like I'm really old. I can't compare to you young people when it comes to picking up girls. Chi Yu said snappily. Alright, you already have 50 girlfriends. If you keep going, you won't let us bachelors live. Let's go back to Qingbei. I think. You still have to report to the school. This time, I'm afraid Qingbei University will have another lewd teacher. The smile on Su Dong's face did not diminish. It was obvious that he was not ashamed, but proud. It should be the perverted tiger teacher. But don't worry, I will definitely protect you. Listening to Su Dong's special voice, Chi Yu laughed mischievously and said, I don't need your protection. However, after arriving at Qingbei, there are a few women you can't fight with me over. How about it? The conversation with Shui Yu just now was just a coincidence. When it comes to picking up girls, Chi Yu naturally understood that he was far from this perverted tiger. Just based on appearance, they were already not on the same level. The two left the hotel, took a taxi and directly returned to Qingbei University. Chi Yu returned to the dormitory, while Su Dong went to the school administration office to report. He had to admit that Hai Ryue's abilities were extensive. In just a short day, she was able to find a teacher position for Su Dong. In Qingbei University, this was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. When Chi Yu returned to the dormitory, it was already noon. Just as he opened the door, he immediately smelled the familiar aroma of food. In the hall, Su Qing was just bringing the dishes to the table. When she saw Chi Yu, she immediately asked, Why did Ming Ming suddenly ask for leave? Did you go out with her last night and do something bad? Chi Yu hurriedly said, I'm wrongly accused. We did come back a bit late yesterday, but I didn't do anything. Ming Ming had to go out of town to do something, so she asked for leave. At this time, Chen Yun also walked out of the kitchen. Hearing Chi Yu's words, she couldn't help but burst into laughter and said, Chi Yu, why do I feel that your words are a bit more obvious? Chi Yu said with a bitter smile, Big Sister Yun, why are you making fun of me? Eat. It was unknown how many times better the food that Chen Yun made was compared to the canteen. Chi Yu ate while praising it. His face was full of enjoyment. Su Qing looked at Chi Yu's mouth that didn't stop and teased. Eat, you only know how to eat. I really don't know if you were a pig in your previous life. When Chi Yu heard the word pig, he couldn't help but feel a trace of peculiarity in his heart. He recalled the scene of him being together with Ming Ming last night. Chen Yun said, Chi Yu, do you still have class in the afternoon? Chi Yu swallowed a mouthful of food and said, Yes, but I forgot what class it was. I'll take a look later. What about you guys? Su Qing glanced at Chen Yun and said, We don't have class. Finish eating and quickly go to class. You'll be late today. Chi Yu thought in his heart, Not only am I late, I didn't even go. Hey, Chen Yun and Su Qing don't have class this afternoon. The two of them wouldn't be surging with passion again, would they? Thinking of this, Chi Yu's lustful gaze couldn't help but sweep over the two girls. What are you looking at? Su Qing unhappily knocked Chi Yu's head with her chopstick. Chen Yun's pretty face was slightly red. She couldn't help but look at Chi Yu with a strange gaze. Okay, I won't look. I'll leave after eating. Although he really wanted to see the live pornography again, he remembered that he would be living here for a long time in the future. He had no choice but to dispel this tempting thought. After eating, Chi-Yu took the book and left the dormitory. As soon as he left, Su-Ching couldn't help but cheer. "Great, finally no one will disturb us." Chen-Yun said, "Ching-er, do you think he will see us that day?" Su-Ching was stunned and said, "It can't be, I heard the sound of the door and quickly came out. Humph, if he saw me, I'll give him a pair of scissors." With that said, she made an exceptionally fierce hand gesture. On the way to class, a certain someone suddenly felt a slight abnormality in his lower body and sneezed. F***ck, who's scolding me? The afternoon class was simply a heavenly book for Chi-Yu. Because the effect of last night's cultivation was very good, his spirit was unusually excited today. In addition to the various cultivation methods of Kirin and Kirin's secret arts, his mind often flashed with the scene of Chen-Yun and Su-Ching, that pair of beautiful girls in bed. For a moment, his heart couldn't help but be a little confused. 2 weeks quickly passed. Chi-Yu lived a cycle of life every day. During the day, he went to class, cultivated at night, and when he didn't have class, he would spend his time in meditation. Although he didn't know what level his strength had reached, but every time he cultivated, he could clearly feel the thundercloud force in his body increase. In these 2 weeks, a piece of news from Qingbei University couldn't help but make him somewhat unhappy. In the majority of the female students, there was a handsome teacher in the finance department. This teacher was none other than the perverted tiger, Su Dong. In Chi-Yu's view, this perverted tiger wasn't here to protect him, but to pick up girls. In these 2 weeks, he didn't even see a shadow. As the time they spent together increased, Chi-Yu, Su-Ching, and Chen-Yun also became more and more familiar. Although Su-Ching's character was a little impatient, she didn't lose her liveliness. On the other hand, although Chen-Yun looked friendly on the surface, it made Chi-Yu feel that she was always hiding something. In the beginning, he thought that Chen-Yun was only hiding her relationship with Su-Ching, but after a long time, he found that Chen-Yun often looked out the window and sighed, not knowing what she was thinking. When Vol had just arrived in Tibet, he had called him to tell him that everything was fine, and that Master Zagru was ready to give them the initial awakening. Chapter 26. Bang, the dormitory door was slammed shut, and Su-Ching ran in excitedly. Chi-Yu had just finished showering and was only wearing a pair of shorts. When Su-Ching saw him, she couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah, you, what are you doing?" Chi-Yu was also shocked by her. "Miss, you came back with such a big commotion, how can I not come out to take a look?" Su-Ching quickly glanced at Chi-Yu's lower body, and her face immediately turned red, saying, "Who told you to wear so little? Aren't you afraid of freezing to death?" Chi-Yu laughed bitterly. "It's not cold in the dormitory at all. The school's heating system came early, and it's already here today." Su-Ching snorted and snappily said, "Peanut beans. F***ck, who are you calling peanut beans? Do you want to try?" A man's dignity was the easiest to be touched in that aspect. Su-Ching looked at Chi-Yu's angry expression and couldn't help but laugh, saying, "Pfft, who wants to try with you? Take advantage of my good mood and quickly go back to your room and put on some clothes. Otherwise, I'll kick you out of the dormitory." Chi-Yu curiously asked, "You seem to be very happy today. Could it be that you've found a handsome guy? The heavens wouldn't be so blind, would they?" Su-Ching glared at Chi-Yu hatefully. He said, "Who likes those stinky men? Although there are many people chasing after me, none of them have caught my eye. Oh right, don't you know? The school is going to organize an autumn outing. Finally, I don't have to stay in school anymore. This is a good opportunity to play. Moreover, it's said that this spring outing will last for several days. It's a relatively far place." Chi-Yu was startled. He said, "Spring outing?" This word was already somewhat far away from him, and the last time it was said was 6 to 7 years ago. Looking at Chi-Yu's somewhat dejected expression, Su-Ching asked doubtfully, "What's wrong with you? Don't you want to go? I don't think you're the kind of nerd who chooses to stay in school and study by himself. Chiyu forced a smile and said, Why wouldn't I want to go? I wonder where I'm going this time. Suqing shrugged and said, I don't know either. However, Sister Yun had always been well informed in the Department of Physics and Thermal. There should be news when he comes back, right? Would Chiyu like a spring outing? The answer was no. When he was young, other children would bring along large amounts of snacks and pocket money that their parents had prepared for them on their spring outing. However, his bag was only filled with steamed buns and pickled vegetables. Chiyu looked at the other children who were in high spirits and then looked at his lonely self. Every spring outing was a very bad memory for him. Unfortunately, the spring outing was a group activity at that time. He couldn't choose not to go. While they were talking, the door of the dormitory opened and Shin Yun walked in. Suqing couldn't wait to ask, Sister Yun, where are we going for the spring outing the day after tomorrow? Do you have any news? Chen Yun smiled faintly and said, Girl, you are always so impatient. Won't the school announce it tomorrow? Suqing pulled Shin Yun's hand and said coquettishly, No, I want to know now, you must have news, right? Shin Yun smiled and said, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. We are going to Beidei this time. The moment Suqing heard the 3 words Beidei, her expression immediately fell. It can't be, our Qingbei University is too tasteless. I don't know how many times I have been there since I was young, but we are going again. How boring. Beidei was a seaside tourist area not far from the capital. As long as you were a Beijinger, you would have been there before. The sea there was a good place to relax in the summer. Suqing didn't expect that they would be going there. Shin Yun said, Qing don't be like this. Beidei has been focusing on greening and protecting the sea for the past 2 years. It is much better than before. Although it is a bit cold at this time of year and not suitable for swimming, eating seafood is not bad. Anyway, we are just going to play, look at the sea, and relax. Suqing curled her lips and said, That is the only way. The school will not change its mind because of me. No wonder Chi-Yu wasn't very happy when he heard about the spring outing. He must have known. Pervert, tell me, did you already know? Because Chi-Yu's eyes were habitually glued to the ice cream on them, the title of pervert had already landed on him a week ago. Chi-Yu said helplessly, How would I know? But going to the sea seems to be good too. I have never been there before. Suqing and Shin Yun looked at each other in surprise. You have never been to the sea? It can't be. Chi-Yu said, What's new about it? If I have never been there, then I have never been there. All right, beauties, I will return to my room first. Call me when it is time to eat. What a pity. I can't swim now, why don't? Just when one of the beauties saw these words, Chi-Yu didn't say it out loud. He was no longer the child of the past. After a short memory, he immediately walked out of the unhappy childhood. The sea was once a place of his dreams, and this opportunity was not bad. 2 days later, Qingbei University's super-large tour group left the capital early in the morning. A total of 10 large tour cars headed towards Beidei, which was 200 miles away. The reason Qingbei University chose Beidei was actually very simple. It was because it was already past the peak tourist season. Right now, it was the cheapest time to travel in Beidei. Whether it was food or accommodation, it was much cheaper. Moreover, Beidei was very close to the capital. The tourist facilities were complete, and it was very convenient to go back and forth. As soon as Chi-Yu sat in the car, he immediately aroused the jealousy of many of his fellow male compatriots. The tour cars that Qingbei University hired were very spacious. Each car was double-decker and could accommodate 300 people at the same time. Each floor had 3 seats, and in the middle was an aisle. Suqing and Shin Yun had many friends, but because Ming Ming had asked them to take care of Chi-Yu before she left, and seeing that Chi-Yu was lonely, they sat together with him. No matter who it was, having 2 beauties by his side would probably arouse the jealousy of other men. Looking at the scenery outside the car, Chi-Yu's mood today was abnormally happy. He tightly hugged his school bag, as if he was afraid that it would run away. The things in the school bag were not expensive, but they were specially prepared by Shin Yun for him yesterday. They were all his favorite things. For the first time, this was the first time that Chi-Yu had brought his own delicacies on a spring outing. How could he not be happy? There are still 2 hours left. Chi-Yu, let's play something. Su Qing's eyes flickered with a mischievous light as she looked at Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Sure. What do you want to play?" Su Qing thought for a while and said, "The car is small. How about let's play rock paper scissors? The 3 of us will take turns to play rock paper scissors. Whoever loses has to answer a question from the winner. No lies allowed. How about it?" Chi-Yu was stunned for a moment before he forcefully suppressed his laughter. Putting on a reluctant expression, he said, "All right then." As a former ruffian, rock-paper-scissors was a common occurrence to him. Su Qing playing rock-paper-scissors with him, wasn't it the same as offering her secrets? "Then I'll play with you first," Su Qing said impatiently. She chose the simplest rock-paper-scissors. Although it was simple, it was also a psychological test. Unfortunately, she met Chi-Yu. Without any suspense, Chi-Yu won the first round. "I won. Qing, can I ask a question?" Chi-Yu smirked as he looked up and down at Su Qing. Because it was an autumn outing today, Su Qing was dressed particularly casually, wearing a long-sleeved t-shirt. The white t-shirt outlined her exquisite body, and she wore a sky-blue skirt, revealing a pair of beautiful legs that attracted countless lustful eyes. "What are you looking at? Best of 3, okay? You just won the first round." Su Qing was not a person who would easily admit defeat. "Gosh, you didn't say it just now." "It's not too late for me to say it now." Chi-Yu found that he was not a girl's opponent in calculating these things, so he said, "Okay, again." After a moment, Su Qing looked at Chi-Yu with dissatisfaction. "You go back." I. "Okay, again. What else do you have to say now?" Chi-Yu looked at Su Qing with a smile. Su Qing glared at him and said, "Okay, I'm willing to admit defeat. Ask away." Chi-Yu rolled his eyes. From the first round to the last round, Su Qing found a total of 10 excuses. Was this still called admitting defeat? "My question is, who is the person you like the most?" Chi-Yu asked while sneaking a glance at Shen Yun beside him. "Mom." Su Qing answered almost without hesitation. Chi-Yu almost fainted, scolding himself for asking such a bad question. There was obviously no flaw in her answer. "Big Sister Yun, go and avenge me. You will definitely be able to destroy him." Su Qing looked at Chi-Yu as if she was looking at an irreconcilable enemy. Shin Yun smiled slightly. It was the same scissors, rock, paper. However, this time, Chi-Yu had met his match. Compared to Su Qing, who showed everything on her face, Shin Yun's expression did not change, no matter what she said. After 3 rounds, although Chi-Yu won, he still lost one of the rounds. "It doesn't count, it doesn't count. You go back," Su Qing said delicately. Shin Yun smiled and said, "Qing, don't be like this. Chi-Yu, ask away." Chi-Yu looked at Shin Yun. For a moment, he did not know where to start. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Who is your favorite person of the opposite sex?" Shin Yun burst into laughter. At this time, all the students sitting around, as long as they were male, pricked up their ears, waiting for Shin Yun's answer. "Chi-Yu, I think your question is stupid. My favorite person of the opposite sex is naturally my dad." Everyone fell to the ground. Many people had already begun to curse Chi-Yu in low voices. Chi-Yu looked at Shin Yun. Shin Yun also looked at him, and shook her head helplessly. Chi-Yu said, "I'm not playing anymore. If you keep asking like this, I'm going to die of anger." "No, you want to run away after winning?" Su Qing said angrily. Chi-Yu glanced at her and said, "You really want to play?" Su Qing said firmly, "I want to play." Chi-Yu said, "Then don't regret it." Su Qing snorted and said, You're the one who will regret it. Then come. A few minutes later. How could you use a hammer again? It doesn't count, it doesn't count. Su Qing angrily hit Chi-Yu's shoulder. Chi-Yu said helplessly, You want to play? Then how about this, I won't ask you any more questions. Let's end this game, okay? No, maybe your luck won't be so good next time. Go ahead and ask, I'll answer you. Su Qing was obviously not convinced. Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a trace of naughtiness. He moved closer to Su Qing's ear and whispered something. Su Qing's face suddenly turned red. You pervert. Her shy appearance seemed to want to find a hole to hide in. Chi-Yu laughed and said, You didn't say I couldn't ask this. Quickly answer. I've already given you a lot of face by not asking loudly. I think I'm not the only one who wants to know this question. Su Qing looked at Xinyun for help. Xinyun curiously said, What did he ask you? Su Qing whispered something in Xinyun's ear. This time, even Xinyun's face couldn't help but turn red. He softly said, Scoundrel. Chi-Yu laughed and said, I can't help it. My brain isn't good. I can only think of this kind of killing question. Su Qing forcefully patted Chi-Yu's leg and whispered something in his ear. When Chi-Yu heard her words, his eyes suddenly became like they were about to spit out fire. He forcefully swallowed a mouthful of saliva and slowly spat out 2 words, You're strong. Su Qing looked at Xinyun and revealed a questioning gaze. It was as if he was asking her if she wanted to continue playing. Xinyun's charming face turned red. She lowered her head and said, Let's rest for a while. Chi-Yu complacently leaned on his seat. His mind was filled with thoughts. It was no wonder he would be like this. In fact, his question was very simple. He asked Su Qing what her underwear looked like today. Su Qing's answer was, T-shaped, lacy, and pink. The 2-hour car ride quickly ended. When Su Qing and Xinyun got off the car, they immediately went to gather. They didn't even pay attention to Chi-Yu. Because of the large number of people, this time Qingbei University directly booked 3 adjacent hotels to put these students down. Although it was already late October, the weather these few days was exceptionally hot and stuffy. It was as if the old saying of the bald tiger was true. Chi-Yu hadn't been in Qingbei University for a long time. During class, he slept most of the time and basically didn't have any friends. When the school allocated the accommodation, because no one was willing to stay with him, he received special treatment and had a room to himself. Chi-Yu was also happy to be free. This way, he could also cultivate by himself. Although Beidei wasn't very beautiful, staying in a seaside hotel, when Chi-Yu opened the curtains, he was immediately shocked by everything in front of him. The boundless sea was clearly layered. The closest to the shore was the light blue seawater. Although it couldn't be said to be clear, the waves were turbulent. The sound of the waves hitting the beach made Chi-Yu feel as if he had entered another world. His mind was broadened. The seawater spread inwards. The further it was from the shore, the darker the color of the seawater became. The distant sea and the endless waves couldn't help but make him a little dazed. The sea breeze blew in from the open window, taking away the stuffy heat and leaving behind a bit of coolness. Although the salty and fishy smell wasn't pleasant, it had the unique smell of the sea. Chi-Yu was very glad that he chose to come to Beidei. Because there was the sea here, his childhood dream had finally come true. He had an impulse in his heart, and couldn't wait to dive into the sea and swim. Just at this time, his phone rang. Who is it? It's me. Su Qing's still slightly angry voice came from the phone. Thinking of Su Qing's reply, Chi-Yu resisted the urge to laugh out loud. What's wrong? Miss Su, why are you looking for me? Su Qing said, It's not that I'm looking for you. It's Sister Yun who asked me to call you. The school doesn't have any arrangements for lunch. Eat what you brought and then it's free time. Sister Yun asked me to ask you where you're going after lunch. Chi-Yu thought about it and said, I don't know. What about you guys? Su Qing said, Sister Yun and I will go for a walk by the beach. I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. Come and be my escort. Okay. Chi-yu agreed without hesitation. How could he give up this kind of opportunity to get close to a beauty? After eating the lunch that Shen Yun brought for him, Chi-yu used the phone to make an appointment with the two girls and left the room. The sea was very beautiful and the beach had its unique points. However, when the beach was full of people, this beauty disappeared a lot. This time, there were tens of thousands of students from Qingbei University. Almost everyone chose to take a walk by the beach with tacit understanding. Although the sea was still as magnificent as before, the original tranquility was undoubtedly destroyed. Depressing, why are there so many people? Su Qing looked around unhappily. Shen Yun smiled and said, Isn't this normal? Let's go further, there should be fewer people. Su Qing and Shen Yun held hands and walked in front, while Chi-yu followed behind. He wasn't unhappy because of the number of people. Among the 10,000 students, there were bound to be a few beauties. As he walked forward, his eyes constantly roamed around the crowd. At this time, a fresh figure attracted Chi-yu's attention. Around her, there were at least 20 to 30 people surrounding her. He didn't know what they were talking about. This fresh figure was the foreign language department's teacher, Wenwei. Chi-yu saw her, and she also saw Chi-yu. She smiled and nodded to him. Chi-yu hurriedly nodded. Although he wanted to go up and say hello, seeing that there were so many flies around Wenwei, he still dispelled the idea. As they got further and further away from the hotel, the people on the beach finally lessened. Su Qing excitedly climbed onto a large reef and shouted. The waves swallowed her voice, and under the sea breeze, she seemed like a fairy of the sea. Chi-yu secretly thought that it was a pity. It would be better if Qing'er's skirt was a little shorter. It would definitely be blown up by the wind. Chi-yu, I'm not convinced today. Do you dare to make another bet with me? Su Qing stood on the reef and looked down at Chi-yu. Chi-yu said, What do you want to bet with me? Su Qing said, If you lose, you will go swimming naked in the sea tonight. If I lose, I will also promise you a condition. Do you dare to bet? Before saying what the bet was, she couldn't wait to state her condition. Chi-yu said with a bitter smile, Although I'm good at swimming. However, was it a good idea to swim naked? Tell me what you want to bet first. Although the weather was very hot these 2 days, and swimming was a good choice, if he was seen swimming naked at night, he was afraid that he would not be able to find a hole in the sand. Su Qing said, It's very simple. We will start running from here, and whoever reaches the beach first wins. While Chi-yu was stunned, Su Qing had already run out. The terrain they were in was very strange. The reef was between the beach and the sea. If they wanted to reach the beach, the fastest way was to climb over the reef and run to the sea. If not, they could only take a detour. Hey, I haven't agreed yet. Why are you running? As soon as Su Qing started running, Chi-yu knew that he was tricked. However, his reaction was very fast. He pressed his hands on the reef in front of him and nimbly flipped over. He chased after Su Qing in front of him. Su Qing looked back and smiled. Since you are chasing me, it means that you agree. Come on, come on. Her speed when running with her long legs wasn't any slower than an ordinary man's. By the time Chi-yu reached the reef, she had already jumped off from the other side and was running towards the beach. They were only a dozen meters away from the sea. Chi-yu glanced behind him and saw that Shen Yun did not follow. His eyes flashed as he quickly took a few steps forward. When he reached the edge of the reef, he lightly shouted, Appear. His body jumped high into the air as he extended his arms to the side. The originally disorderly sea breeze quietly condensed around his body. Accompanied by a faint layer of green light, his whole body glided forward. Su Qing was excited. She was just a few steps away from winning. Although Chi-yu might accuse her of cheating, it was enough to see him suffer a setback. Just as she was imagining Chi-yu's bitter face, suddenly, there was a light breeze beside her. A tall and straight figure had already overtaken her. Before she could react, the figure had already rushed into the sea. His feet stepped on the water, and he turned around to look at her with a smile. "No, that's impossible." Su Qing stopped in her tracks. She could not believe that Qi Yu could be so fast. Qi Yu looked at her with a smile and said, "There is nothing impossible in this world. Don't you think that I am very talented in sports?" Su Qing said, But don't you have a heart disease? And I stood on the reef before you, how could you catch up? There is not enough time." Qi Yu patted his chest and said, "Sorry, my heart is in good condition today." "Qing you lost. You have to promise me one thing." Su Qing pouted and almost cried. When she thought of Qi Yu's question in the car, she knew that this lecher would not say anything good. Before Qi Yu said his condition, she hurriedly said, "The condition must be reasonable. There must not be any insults to women, including not asking me to have an improper relationship with you." Qi Yu laughed and said, "Am I that kind of person? I have always been very kind." Su Qing curled her lips and said, "You are kind? Humph, now I remember why Ming Ming had that kind of expression when we said you are honest. You are a hooligan, a ruffian." Qi Yu smiled and said, "These two names are really intimate. Okay, I will say my condition. Don't worry. My condition will not insult you, nor will it make you have an improper relationship with me. I am an honest person. Unless you throw yourself into my arms, otherwise I will not have any improper thoughts." Su Qing snorted and said, "In your dreams." "Fine. Say it." Qi Yu looked at her up and down and said, "Didn't you say that if I lose, you will let me swim naked at night? Well, my request will not be as excessive as yours. I only ask that you come and swim with me at night. It is not easy to come to the sea. If I don't swim I will feel very wronged." "No, no way." Su Qing angrily stared at Qi Yu, thinking that this guy actually wanted her to swim alone with him, and at night, Su Qing's heart couldn't help but speed up. Qi Yu's eyes revealed a trace of contempt. "So you are afraid of the dark? Then forget it." "Nonsense. You are the one who is afraid of the dark. If I am afraid of you, then I am not Su Qing." Su Qing immediately covered her mouth in regret after saying this impulsively. Qi Yu walked out of the sea, took off his wet shoes and held them in his hand. "Okay, then I will call you at night." As he said this, he walked towards the direction of the reef with the attitude of a victor. Su Qing heavily stomped the sand under her feet a few times, and said to herself coquettishly, "I fell for this bastard's trick again. I am so angry." When Qi Yu and Su Qing returned to the other side of the reef, Shen Yun had been waiting for them for a long time with a smile on her face. But when she saw Su Qing's face full of anger, she couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Qing, don't tell me you still lost like this?" Su Qing fiercely looked at Qi Yu and said, "God knows how he can run so fast, I really wonder if he flew." She didn't know that although Qi Yu didn't fly, he did use the ability of the wind to glide for a certain distance. Although this ability wasn't very useful in an environment like the reef, gliding from top to bottom could indeed increase a lot of speed. Qi Yu had a victorious smile on his face, but he didn't say anything. In his heart, he was fantasizing about the beauty of the night swimming with a beauty in the sea. Shen Yun looked at Qi Yu in surprise. She also found it hard to believe that this was the truth. After all, she saw with her own eyes that Qi Yu started much later than Su Qing, but he was actually able to catch up. She couldn't help but suspect that Qi Yu really had a heart problem. Qi Yu stretched his body as he walked to Shen Yun's side. "Sister Yun, where are we going next?" Shen Yun looked at Su Qing with a questioning look. Su Qing glared at Qi Yu and said, "We're not going anywhere. I'm so angry I'm going to die." After saying that, she turned around and walked back angrily. Shen Yun hurriedly chased after her, holding Su Qing's small hand as if she was asking about the previous situation. Qi Yu was left behind alone. Qi Yu was also happy to be free. "I'm singing a crooked tune, I'm smiling proudly in my heart." He had never swum with a girl in his life, let alone night swimming in the sea. If something happened, it would be very normal. While walking, Chi-Yu had a cigarette in his mouth. Because he won a lot of money in the car race before Ming Ming left, his price increased. The cigarettes also changed from 2 yuan a box of Huang Gueshu to 6 yuan a box of Honghe. The taste was much better than before. While he was smoking and following the two beauties in the direction of the hotel, 3 people walked towards them. In the middle of the 3 people was the lewd tiger. His white casual clothes made Su Dong's originally handsome figure even straighter. He still had his usual elegant smile on his face. On each side of him, there was a beauty. Although these 2 beauties couldn't be said to be stunning, they could be considered delicate. No matter how you look at it, they were at least at the level of eye candy. What made Chi-Yu very envious was that these 2 beauties looked exactly the same. They were a pair of twins. Suddenly, they were upgraded from eye candy to desire level. This lewd tiger really had a way. He could even find such special beauties. Ever since Su Dong followed Chi-Yu to Qingbei University, they haven't seen his shadow for the past 2 weeks. It seems that apart from being a teacher, he spent most of his time picking up girls. He even said something about protecting himself. Su Dong also saw Chi-Yu. Of course, he first noticed Shen Yun and Su Qing walking in front, then glanced at Chi-Yu through the gap between them. 2 students don't go too far when you're out. After all, this isn't Qingbei. It wouldn't be good if there's danger. The soft voice sounded very comfortable. Su Dong took the initiative to greet Shen Yun and Su Qing. Su Qing looked at the handsome man in front of her curiously. "Ah, you're the new teacher in the finance department." Su Dong smiled and nodded. Chi-Yu, who walked to the 2 girls' side, had to admit that whether it was temperament or elegance, this guy Su Dong was almost impeccable. Shen Yun smiled and said, "Thank you for your concern, teacher. We'll prepare to go back now." As she said that, her gaze swept across the 2 beauties. The twins clearly had a strong dependence on Su Dong. They didn't pay attention to them. Their affectionate gaze always fell on Su Dong. Chi-Yu said snappily, "This, Teacher Su, we haven't seen each other for 2 weeks." Su Dong's gaze fell on Chi-Yu. "Yeah, it really has been 2 weeks. Come, let's chat." As he said that, he greeted the 2 beauties beside him and pulled Chi-Yu to the side. "Not bad. Boss Kirin, it seems that I really have to learn from you. I heard that you actually live in the girls' dormitory. I admire you." Chi-Yu unhappily replied, "Your head is filled with semen, isn't it? Su Qing and Shen Yun are just my roommates." Su Dong smiled and said, "A real man doesn't need to explain. F*ck me. What about you? You're a beast of a teacher. You've just arrived at Qingbei and you're already destroying the flowers of the motherland." Chi-Yu said hatefully. Su Dong still had a smile on his face. "How am I destroying? I'm promoting the flowers of the motherland to bloom perfectly, promoting their growth and development, helping them build new lives and ideals. Qingbei should promote me to be a professor since I'm such an outstanding teacher who cares about students." Chi-Yu looked at Su Dong speechlessly. "This guy looks elegant, but his skin is not ordinary thick. This level is obviously much higher than me." Chapter 27. Chi-Yu, that's more like it. However, does Qingbei University really have a powerful aura? Could it be a beast? But why didn't Ming Ming tell me about it? Su Dong said indifferently, "Don't forget, I'm the king of beasts." His impatience towards the beasts was much stronger than what Ming Ming felt. Furthermore, my cultivation is higher than Ming Ming's by a bit. However, I can only capture the true existence of this aura. However, you don't need to worry. Although this aura is powerful, it's very peaceful. It shouldn't have any malicious intent. Furthermore, it has already existed in Qingbei University for quite some time. I heard Ryua say that the location of Qingbei University itself is a dragon's lair. Perhaps there's a hidden guardian guarding the dragon's lair. Glancing at the 2 girls waiting for Chi-Yu, he said with a low laugh, "All right, I won't hold you up any longer. When a flower blooms, it needs to be plucked. Don't wait for the flower to fall and break the branch. I can see that those two girls are still virgins. It's hard for you to hold back. Goodbye. Finished speaking, he left Chi-Yu behind and called out to his pair of beautiful twins. Virgins? Are there still virgins in universities in this era? Chi-Yu looked at Shen Yun and Jing Qing with a strange gaze. You know that teacher Su? It seems like you're very familiar with him. When Chi-Yu walked to the side of the two girls, Su Qing couldn't help but ask suspiciously. Chi-Yu said in a low voice, You guys have to be careful of this guy. He's synonymous with lasciviousness. He's a famous erotic sissy. Shen Yun giggled and said, But why do I feel that teacher Su is much more serious than you? Chi-Yu snorted in disdain and said, He's serious? Would a serious person bring two beauties to stroll around? It's just that he's good at hiding it. Su Qing stuck out her tongue at Chi-Yu and said, Come on. Aren't you still together with two beauties? We have nothing to do with you. Don't look at others with your erotic eyes. Chi-Yu said, Qinger, are you kidding me? It seems like I'm your roommate, and you're just meeting Su Dong for the first time. Don't tell me you've really fallen for him? Su Qing giggled and said, All right, don't talk nonsense. Let's go back. Didn't you ask me to swim with you tonight? I have to prepare myself. I don't even have a swimsuit. As soon as he heard Qinger mention the night swim, Chi-Yu's lust was immediately ignited, and he hurriedly said, Yes, yes, indeed we should prepare. Shen Yun looked at Chi-Yu. Can I go with you guys tonight? Now that I think about it, swimming at night seems quite interesting. Chi-Yu was stunned for a moment, then a strange feeling rose in his heart. Shen Yun was obviously afraid that Su Qing would be at a disadvantage if she went swimming with him. The two of them were. However, the two beauties were swimming with him at night. It seemed to be a good idea. Of course. Having two beauties swimming with me is definitely a wonderful feeling. The first time he saw them, Chi-Yu had clearly seen their alluring figures. If they were to put on swimsuits and play with him in the water, it would definitely be very wonderful. The three of them returned to the hotel and separated. Chi-Yu originally planned to cultivate for a while, but he kept fantasizing about the two beauties in swimsuits in his heart. He couldn't calm down no matter what, so he could only smoke and watch TV in the room to pass the time. The waiting time was always so long. Chi-Yu looked left and right, and finally, it was time for dinner. Dinner was arranged by Qingbei University. Although the food wasn't anything good, and there wasn't any good seafood, most of the students would usually eat in the school cafeteria. This meal was also very enjoyable. There were often a lot of couples in the university. According to Chi-Yu's knowledge, no matter which university, when the students just entered the first year, they were relatively pure. At most, they would talk about some topics related to the opposite sex. But when it came to the second year, as long as they had some ability, they would be able to find a partner of the opposite sex. And when it came to the third year, there were very few people living in the dormitory. Cohabitation seemed to have become a new trend among university students. And when it came to the fourth year, there weren't many couples who could really maintain their relationship. Once they graduated, most of them, who came from all over the country, would choose to break up. Qingbei University was worthy of being one of the best universities in Yanhuang Republic. The situation of this kind of student couples was relatively rare, but it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Just after dinner, one could already see pairs of couples very tacitly leaving the hotel, not knowing where to go. Chi-Yu returned to his room and couldn't wait to call Su Qing. How is it, beautiful, are you ready? Su Qing impatiently said. What are you rushing for, isn't the sky just dark? All right, wait for us at the entrance of the hotel. Chi-Yu was overjoyed. After hanging up the phone, he hurriedly changed into the swimming trunks that he had specially brought. He put on a pair of casual trousers, draped a coat over his upper body, and left the room. After waiting at the entrance of the hotel for a full 20 minutes, when Chi-Yu's patience was about to run out, he saw two beauties coming. They both had their long hair combed into a ponytail. The different hair colors set off their white and delicate skin and exquisite figure, looking full of temptation. Seeing their appearance, Chi Yu's impatience from waiting suddenly disappeared, and he hurriedly went to greet them. Shen Yun's face blushed as she whispered, "Let's go." The three of them went out of the hotel. Just when Chi Yu wanted to take them to the beach, he was stopped by Su Qing. "Fool, today's weather is so stuffy, I don't know how many couples are going to night swim. We don't want to be seen by others." Chi Yu was stunned for a moment as he said, "Then what should we do? Are we going to wait for them to finish swimming before we go?" Su Qing said, "There's no need for that, we'll just go further away. The sea around the hotel is fenced for tourists to swim, why do we have to be here?" Chi Yu frowned and said, "But only this kind of beach is the safest. That's why we have the protection of shark net." Su Qing laughed and said, "You're from Mars, right? There are sharks in Beidei too? I don't know how many times I've been here. I've never heard of it. Moreover, sharks don't move in shallow water. Coward, don't tell me you don't dare to go?" "I don't dare? Why wouldn't I dare? I'm just afraid that you two beauties are too attractive and attract the sharks. If something happens, I won't be able to explain myself." Su Qing said, "All right then, our bet is void. Sister Yun, let's go back." Saying that, she pulled Shen Yun's hand and was about to go back. Don't. It's fine if we go further. In any case, I'll protect you." Chi Yu hurriedly stopped the two girls. What a joke, such a good opportunity was hard to come by. Although Chi Yu didn't really want anything to happen with the two girls, to be able to swim with them at night and see their beautiful figures up close, how could he let go of this opportunity? It was already autumn, and although the past 2 days had been particularly hot, the sky still darkened very early. The three of them wore the slippers provided by the hotel and walked along the beach towards the beach further away. A cool breeze blew past, taking away a few dark clouds above their heads, and the round moon revealed its shy face, immediately bringing a bit of brilliance to the dark land. It was like a jade plate hanging in the sky. Specks of starlight were like the pearls that set off the jade plate, flickering with a faint light. The seawater made a splashing sound, reflecting the bright moon and starlight, and the hazy beauty was enough to intoxicate people. "So beautiful! We actually managed to catch the bright moon rising from the sea. How lucky!" This was the first time Shen Yun showed her girly side in front of Chi Yu. She excitedly ran to the beach, allowing the tide to wash her pair of pure white feet. "It's indeed very beautiful, but what kind of luck is this?" Chi Yu asked as he looked at the magnificent sea. Su Qing giggled, "Fool! The sea is made of water. The fog on the sea has always been thick, and it's easier for clouds to form above. It's common for clouds to block the moon, so of course it's lucky to see the moon at night. It's like watching the sun rise from the top of a mountain. Without luck, you won't be able to see anything." Chi Yu finally understood. He threw off his slippers and ran to Shen Yun's side. Smelling the smell of the sea, looking at the beautiful scenery in front of him, he couldn't help but let out a long whistle. The sound waves rolled up, attracting the attention of Shen Yun and Su Qing. At that moment, the two girls suddenly discovered to their surprise that the whistle from Chi Yu's mouth seemed to cover the roar of the sea, and the sound was long and profound. Even his pair of black eyes emitted an imposing aura that they had never seen before. At this moment, his body seemed especially tall. Unfortunately, they didn't notice that the dark sea in the distance seemed to respond to Chi Yu's whistle. It slightly rolled, and a huge black tail stretched out from the surface of the sea. In the blink of an eye, it returned to the sea. "Hey, stop howling like a wolf!" Su Qing patted Chi Yu's shoulder, and only then did his emotional whistle stop. Chi Yu looked at Su Qing with dissatisfaction and said, "Don't you think my whistle is very pleasant to listen to?" Su Qing giggled and said, "Of course it's pleasant to listen to, and it's also very tempting." Chi Yu's eyes lit up. "You think so too?" Su Qing jokingly said, "Yes. However, you have to be careful. On this night of the full moon, if a group of female wolves came to take a taxi to catch you, we won't be responsible. Day. Alright, stop fooling around. Let's hurry up, I already can't wait to jump into the embrace of the sea. Shin Yun looked very excited. The three of them quickened their pace along the beach. There were no street lights on the beach, and after walking for about half an hour, they could no longer see anyone. It was not the peak season for tourism, and there were very few people on the beach in the dark of the night. Alright, let's do it here. The three of them walked to the beach behind a reef. Looking at the clear water in front of them, Shin Yun decided on a place to swim at night. Chi Yu swallowed his saliva, and quickly took off his shirt and trousers, revealing the boxer shorts inside. Shin Yun shyly turned his head away, and Su Qing disdainfully looked up and down at Chi Yu and snorted. Chi Yu struck a pose and said, "What are you snorting about? My figure is not bad, right?" Su Qing stuck out her tongue and said, "You have 2 muscles, but your character is too bad." Although she really wanted to mock Chi Yu, she had to admit that Chi Yu's figure was much better than the average person's. He was close to 185 meters tall, with broad shoulders, bronze skin, and although his muscles were not exaggerated, they were very well proportioned. He had a standard inverted triangle figure. Although his appearance was not outstanding, that naughty smile of his had a bit of a strange attraction. However, what attracted Su Qing more was the necklace on Chi Yu's neck, and the bracelet and relic beads on his left hand. The Qilin bead hung from Chi Yu's neck. Regardless of whether it was the Qilin bead's 4-colored necklace or the Qilin bead itself, the hazy luster of the Qilin bead was exceptionally obvious in the night. The purple, blue, red, and green lights slowly changed and contrasted with Chi Yu's body, making him look especially spirited. And the relic beads automatically emitted a layer of luster at night. Although the light was very weak, as long as one looked at that soft luster, it would make one's heart feel especially comfortable. And the bracelet with the relic beads looked the most exaggerated on the surface. Although the red gem on the bracelet was on the inside of the wrist, because it was night, under the luster of the relic beads, it still emitted a bright light. What is this? A glass ball? It can change color, and there is a light bulb inside, right? The production is quite exquisite. Su Qing curiously touched the Kirin beads. Chi Yu hurriedly took a step back, letting her touch empty air. It's just an ordinary glass ball, don't touch it. Aren't you going to change your clothes? When Shin Yun heard Su Qing's curious voice, he could not help but turn his head. Seeing the light emitted by the treasures on Chi Yu's body, he could not help but let out a light sound of surprise. The way he looked at Chi Yu suddenly changed. Stingy, drink cold water. What's there to touch? Su Qing unhappily chased after him, reaching out to grab the Kirin bead. Chi Yu laughed and said, "Come on, I'll let you touch as much as you want in the sea." As he said that, he turned and ran towards the sea. Su Qing angrily stamped her feet, quickly took off her clothes and chased after Chi Yu. At this time, Chi Yu had already run to the beach. Although the autumn sea was a little cold, it was especially comfortable to soak in. When he turned back to look at the shore, he just happened to see Su Qing rushing in his direction. Suddenly, Chi Yu felt his nose heat up, and his eyes were completely fixed on Su Qing. Su Qing's swimsuit was indeed very exaggerated. It was a 2-piece bikini swimsuit, and the blue swimsuit had very little fabric. Although Chi Yu had seen her body once, the temptation of wearing a swimsuit was even stronger. Her plump and fair chest outlined a perfect curve, and the seemingly seductive cleavage was abnormally deep. As she ran, her bouncy chest constantly trembled. The lethality of her breasts was obviously much fiercer than the waves of the sea. Seeing this scene, Chi Yu could not help but think of the 5 waves mantra passed down by a hooligan senior. Among them, the second wave was the wave. It seemed that in the waves of the sea, his luck with women was really going to come. Just as Chi Yu was completely fascinated by Su Qing's graceful and delicate body, Su Qing had also rushed to the beach, and for the third time, she reached out to grab the Kirin bead on his neck. Chiyu forgot that he was already in the sea, and subconsciously stepped back. Su Qing obviously also forgot about this. Her upper body stretched out, but her lower body was blocked by the sea, and her body suddenly fell forward. Meanwhile, Chiyu's upper body leaned back, but his lower body was blocked by the sea, and he suddenly fell back. Su Qing's hand still did not grab the Kirin bead on Chiyu's neck, but she grabbed his shoulder. As the two of them fell forward and backward, their bodies suddenly fell uncontrollably into the sea. When a person lost control of their body, it was inevitable that they would subconsciously grab something to control their body. What Su Qing grabbed was Chiyu's shoulder. And because Chiyu's attention was always on Su Qing, this grab of his, he actually instantly understood the meaning of grabbing a breast dragon's hand. In Su Qing's surprised cry, a ball full of elasticity was already in his hand. The size was just right, and it was just enough to be grasped in one hand. Everything happened in an instant. Before the two of them could wake up from the surprise, their bodies had already fallen into the sea. Su Qing's swimming ability was not very good. Suddenly, her whole body was in the water, and she could no longer care about the devil's claw on her chest. She tightly grabbed Chiyu's shoulder. Her other hand was wrapped around his neck. Perhaps because of the instant understanding, Chiyu's movements became extremely professional at this moment. He grabbed the plump hand without moving, and the other hand tightly hugged the delicate body that was sticking to him. What was the feeling of sitting on a rocket? Chiyu finally experienced it. When both of their bodies entered the sea, the restless little brother of his lower body instantly rose up like a rocket filled with fuel and tightly stuck to Su Qing's lower abdomen. Even the ice-cold sea water could not stop Chiyu's incomparably rising desire. For a moment, his mind became blank. After all, he was still a virgin. Su Qing liked women. This was the first time in her life that a man touched the sensitive part of her body. When she popped her head out of the sea water in Chiyu's embrace and was able to breathe again, complicated feelings suddenly filled her chest. There was anger, there was shyness, and there were also a few strange feelings. Pervert, let go of me. Su Qing struggled fiercely and broke free from Chiyu's embrace. The plump in his hand turned into the ice-cold sea water, which made Chiyu's heart feel a lot empty. He said awkwardly, I didn't do it on purpose. Su Qing roared like a machine gun. You didn't do it on purpose? Then you did it on purpose, planned it, premeditated. What about you? You pervert. I'm going to kill you. While saying that, Su Qing fiercely pounced on Chiyu. Chiyu laughed. His body turned backward, and like a fish, he drilled into the water. With a dolphin splash, he had already jumped 3 to 4 meters away. In terms of swimming, he was not bragging. He really had a very high level. Su Qing unwillingly chased after Chiyu. Chiyu was also happy to let her chase, although he tried his best to control the desire in his heart. But looking at Su Qing, who was like a beautiful rose out of the water in the sea, his little brother refused to listen no matter what he said. Like an iron rod, it rippled with his body in the water. Ah, it's so deep here. Su Qing's swimming level was really average. When Chiyu ran to a deeper place, she finally did not dare to chase anymore. Although her temper had always been very straightforward, she was still a naturally timid girl after all. Chiyu wanted to use the geographical advantage of Su Qing not being able to chase to laugh at her a few words. But, when his gaze swept past Su Qing's side, his gaze immediately froze. Because he just happened to see another mermaid gradually walking into the sea. Shen Yun was currently testing the water temperature as she walked towards the vast and boundless ocean. She was clearly more conservative than Su Jing. A light yellow swimsuit that covered her entire body made her originally extremely white skin appear even more tender. Her long hair was tied up on top of her head. Although she looked much gentler than Su Qing, her figure was even more fiery than Su Qing. Her chest rose and fell, and her slender beautiful legs were extremely perfect. The sea water hit her calves. Seeing this, Chi Yu's eyes shone with a wolf light. He wanted to pounce on her and eat her up. "Pervert, what are you looking at?" Su Qing suddenly screamed, immediately attracting the attention of Chi Yu and Shen Yun. Although she was still floating on the water, her face was in pain. Chi Yu woke up from his daze and hurriedly swam in Su Qing's direction. "What's wrong, Qing er?" In a hurry, his words could not help but be a lot more intimate. "Quickly come and save me, I have a cramp." Su Qing cried out sorrowfully while slapping the water. At this critical moment, Chi Yu's brain suddenly calmed down, and he suddenly plunged into the water. In the sea, diving was undoubtedly the fastest way to move forward. His hands and feet coordinated, and he swam towards Su Qing as fast as he could. In terms of saving people in the water, Chi Yu was still very experienced. In the past, he and a group of hooligans would soak in the swimming pool every day and look at beautiful women. They would specifically wait for a girl to have a cramp to save her. Of course, it was not completely out of kindness. More importantly, they could take advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of her. Therefore, he did not swim in front of Su Qing. When a person was drowning, they would often be very panicked. If he swam in front of her, not only would he not be able to save her, he might even be dragged down. Therefore, Chi Yu very nimbly swam directly behind Su Qing, grabbed her waist with both hands, and pushed her upward by stepping on the water, causing Su Qing's chest to leave the water surface. Only by taking a steady breath of fresh air could a drowning person calm down more easily. Su Qing's struggle disappeared, and Chi Yu also popped his head out of the water. He took a deep breath, and just as he opened his mouth to ask, "Qing er, how are you?" before his voice died away, a slender little hand had already reached in front of his neck and grabbed the Kirin pearl. "Ah!" Su Qing exclaimed again. Ever since the Kirin pearl entered the water, it had always maintained its blue appearance. When she held the Qilin bead in her hand, the bead that was originally shining with a faint blue light suddenly turned purple. A numbing feeling made Su Qing instantly let go of her hand. Chi Yu was stunned, and only then did he realize that he had been tricked. "You lied to me?" Su Qing was a little proud and said with some dissatisfaction, "So what if I lied to you?" Who told you to run so fast? Why does your pearl still have static electricity in the water?" Chi Yu glanced at the Kirin pearl and said helplessly, "How would I know? Jing er, you've become bad." Su Jing laughed. "Didn't I learn it from you? Quickly let go of me." At this time, Chi Yu was still holding her waist, keeping her body above the water surface. Because Chi Yu was behind her, when Su Qing turned around to grab, her body trembled, and it was inevitable that her plump and perky buttocks rubbed against Chi Yu a few times. And although her figure was a little shorter than Chi Yu, because she was being held up, therefore, the place where the friction happened to be was Chi Yu's treasure that had not yet subsided. Feeling the warm and soft buttocks rubbing against him, Chi Yu felt as if his body was about to explode, and the thundercloud force in his body was constantly surging. Especially the water attribute thundercloud force. In this sea, the fluctuations were extremely strong. Kirin was naturally dissolute, and Ink Kirin, as the king of Kirin, was even more outstanding. As Chi Yu's strength continued to increase, his sexual desire also gradually increased. How could his body not have a violent reaction after receiving such a strong stimulation? Rationally, Chi Yu knew that he should immediately let go of Su Jing, in case he did something uncontrollable. But physically and emotionally, he was absolutely unwilling to give up the delicious taste in front of him. For a moment, he could not help but be stunned. At this time, a voice freed Chi Yu. "Jing er, are you okay?" It turned out that Shen Yun had swum to the two of them unknowingly. In terms of speed, her swimming skills were obviously much better than Su Jing's, and her voice that suddenly appeared was like ice water, temporarily calming the lust in Chi Yu's heart. Taking a deep breath, He hurriedly let go of the soft and slender waist in his hand. How could Su Jing not feel the hot giant stick when she touched it just now? But she had always been cheerful and generous, so she did not care about it. She only glared at Chi Yu fiercely, then giggled at Shen Yun and said, "Sister Yun, I'm fine. I was just lying to him." Shen Yun frowned slightly and said, "Jing don't make such a joke in the future. You scared me to death. Chi Yu, don't bully Jing We are all adults, and you are a man after all. You don't wear much when swimming, so you have to stay away from Jing Try not to have any physical contact." Su Jing stuck out her tongue at Chi Yu proudly. Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Sister Yun, I'm innocent. It's always been her throwing herself at me." Chi Yu had a good impression of Shen Yun. He felt that Shen Yun was really like his sister. Although they had not known each other for a long time, she had inadvertently given him care, making him feel at home. Now he was more and more fond of the life in the girls' dormitory. Shen Yun smiled slightly and said, "Okay, let's play here for a while. After all, there is no shark net here. It's safer to be closer to the sea. Jing be careful, don't swim too far. Chi Yu and I will protect you." The wind on the sea gradually became stronger, but the previously ice-cold seawater, after the appearance of the sea breeze, was like a greenhouse, protecting the bodies of the three people. The sea would never freeze. In this kind of weather, the temperature of the seawater would also be maintained at about 20 degrees Celsius. Chi Yu came to swim with the two girls today. He did not plan to do anything. Being able to see two beautiful women in swimsuits at such a close distance was already a very high enjoyment. He did not swim much, but his gaze constantly changed between the two girls. Su Qing's swimming skills were very average. She could only barely keep floating on the water and move forward. But Shen Yun was different. Her swimming posture was very beautiful. That elegant temperament, that graceful and delicate body, set off her like a water fairy. It did not seem like she was swimming. It seemed like she was dancing in the water. But no matter how she swam, she was always by Su Qing's side to protect her. She was afraid that she would really have cramps or drown. Because of the wind, the waves gradually became bigger. Swimming in the sea felt different from swimming in any other place. Wave after wave hit the body, and Chi Yu seemed to find the truth of heaven and earth. The thundercloud force in his body was still operating quickly. The water attribute thundercloud force, because of the changes of the Kirin Pearl, was operating at more than 3 times the usual speed according to the cultivation route. Although his eyes were admiring the beautiful women, Chi Yu did not stop thinking. He faintly understood that the different attributes of Kirin, when cultivated in the corresponding environment, would have the effect of twice the effort with half the result. And he himself was a quadruple attribute Kirin. In the sea, it was obviously more suitable to cultivate the water attribute ability. This was a good discovery. While thinking, Chi Yu simply floated on the spot. He urged the thundercloud force in his body to cultivate while he continued to admire the two beautiful women's graceful swimming posture. Shen Yun swam for a while and turned back to look at Chi Yu. She saw that he was floating there foolishly and did not swim over. Although his eyes were constantly flickering and often fell on her and Qing'er's embarrassing body parts, at least he still listened to her and did not take advantage of her. Thinking of this, she could not help but have a good impression of Chi Yu. She said loudly, "Chi Yu, stay closer to us. We should go back after swimming for a while. The wind is strong. Autumn is still a little cold." Although Chi Yu did not want to go back so soon, he still nodded. Just when he saw Shen Yun's concerned gaze and was about to swim over, Shen Yun's expression suddenly changed. The smile on her face disappeared in an instant, transforming into terror and shock. At the same time, a cold light blossomed in her beautiful eyes as she shouted in a loud voice, "Chi Yu, be careful." Chi Yu also felt that something was wrong. At the same time Shen Yun's expression changed. He first felt an aura. An incomparably powerful aura quickly spread from behind him. That aura seemed to cover the sky and the sun. He could not even tell where it was coming from. Immediately after, the waves of the sea suddenly became stronger. In almost an instant, the sea rose by 10 meters and quickly rose with Qi Yu's body. Shen Yun and Su Qing, who were below, appeared to be a little smaller because of the height. Shen Yun was much stronger than Qi Yu had imagined. She did not hesitate and pounced towards Su Qing, who was not far away, and grabbed Su Qing's small hand. When Qi Yu was completely swallowed by the waves, he clearly saw that Shen Yun had actually hugged Su Qing's body tightly and kissed her cherry lips that were slightly opened because of shock. It can't be, they were actually being intimate at this time? Chapter 28. His body shot out of the water like a cannonball. The first thing Qi Yu did was look at Su Qing and Shen Yun's whereabouts. Fortunately, although it was dark, as the inheritor of Kirin's bloodline, Qi Yu's eyesight was still very amazing. With a glance, he saw Shen Yun struggling to swim towards the shore in the big waves with Su Qing. Because of the impact of the huge wave, they were already very close to the shore. At this moment, he suddenly understood the intention of Shen Yun kissing Su Qing. It was a method of exchanging breath. It could allow the two of them to maintain oxygen for a short period of time and not suffocate in the sea. At this moment, Qi Yu could no longer think about why Shen Yun would be so calm. Because that powerful aura had already swept over from behind him. Without turning back, Qi Yu's eyes shone brightly. In order to save his life, he no longer cared about showing his strength in front of outsiders. Confrontation. With an angry roar, the thundercloud force surged out from within his body. Qi Yu spread his arms to the sides of his body. At the same time, he flipped his palms backwards. In an instant, he used two types of thundercloud force at the same time. The blue was water. Because he was in the sea, the water attribute thundercloud force had been greatly condensed. Although it did not really affect the improvement of Qi Yu's strength, it at least allowed him to temporarily mobilize the water attribute thundercloud force that was much stronger than usual. The seawater below was immediately pulled by the blue light emitted by Qi Yu's palms. It turned into a small wave that swept behind him. At the same time, Qi Yu's arms had already turned blue. In the whistling sea wind, he was like a big bird, gliding towards the shore at the fastest speed he could reach. In times of crisis, people would often be able to display far more strength than usual. At this moment, Qi Yu's control of the wind attribute thundercloud force was extremely exquisite. Not only did he fully display the power of his own thundercloud force, but he also took advantage of the turbulence of the sea wind. Although his body was erratic, the speed at which he flew towards the shore had greatly increased. Shen Yun and Su Qing finally swam to the shore. It was obvious that the torrent was headed for Qi Yu. When Qi Yu used his Kirin ability, it didn't wrap around their bodies. The two girls had already reached the waist-high water and were about to turn around to look. Once they saw it, they could no longer move their gazes away. Qi Yu, who was in the sky, was as dazzling as a star. The dazzling light didn't come from the Kirin thundercloud force, but from his body. It had a black body, silver fur, and a black and silver horn. All of them exuded the aura of powerhouses. The ink Kirin pattern was so beautiful. The proud ink Kirin raised his head proudly in front of Qi Yu's chest. Using the thundercloud force would naturally trigger the Kirin pattern on his body. During the day, Qi Yu had used the wind attribute thundercloud force once, but at that time, it wasn't obvious because he was wearing clothes. Moreover, he didn't use the thundercloud force at that time, so he didn't trigger too much of the Kirin's aura. But now it was different. In order to protect his life, Qi Yu used almost all of his strength, and the Kirin pattern on his body became particularly clear. What was even more strange was that not only did the Kirin pattern appear on his body, but at the same time, a faint brilliance appeared around his body. The black brilliance couldn't be seen in the dark, but the silver brilliance was extremely obvious. It was clearly an ink kirin that was galloping. The huge pattern was illusory, but it protected Chi-Yu in it. Under the impact of the powerful aura in front and behind him, Chi-Yu's body was protected by the kirin illusion, which allowed him to reach the shore at the fastest speed. It wasn't that Chi-Yu didn't want to look back, but he didn't dare to look back. Although he had already raised his flying speed to the limit, he could still clearly feel that the powerful aura was getting closer and closer to him. Sister Yun, run. Chi-Yu didn't forget to shout crazily in the air. Shen Yun's eyes flickered with a dazzling brilliance. He looked at Chi-Yu in the air, but he didn't retreat at all. Su Qing's eyes began to shine. A girl was a girl after all. At this time, she actually said something that almost made Shen Yun, who was beside her, fall into the water. Too handsome, I didn't expect him to be so handsome. It's actually a luminous tattoo. And it's a silver, invisible tattoo. Chi-Yu naturally couldn't hear Su Qing's voice. He only wanted to quickly escape from his opponent's attack, and at the same time, he wanted to know what had suddenly attacked him. Judging from the powerful aura, it was definitely not a human, nor could it be any technological facility. That kind of terrifying power, even when he faced Xieji, he didn't feel it. Chi-Yu naturally couldn't be compared to the first time he saw Xieji. But the guy behind him, just the aura alone was enough to fill his heart with fear. That huge and powerful aura was definitely something he couldn't defend against. Gliding was not flying, it was gradually descending. Under the situation where Chi-Yu was operating thundercloud force at full strength, the ground was already in front of him. Shen Yun and Su Qing had already run to the shore. Before he could even heave a sigh of relief, a huge suction force suddenly came from behind him. Before he could react, his body had already been thrown into the air. His body continued to rise and spin in the air, but at this time, Chi-Yu's heart was very clear. He knew that he must have encountered a fierce beast, and an incomparably powerful fierce beast. Against this fierce beast, he didn't even have the slightest possibility of resisting. Because his body was spinning, Chi-Yu's eyes were fixed on the surface of the sea. At the same time, he quickly pressed the red gem on his bracelet. When Chi-Yu pressed the red gem, he suddenly discovered an abnormal phenomenon. The originally warm and lustrous relic bead actually became abnormally hot at this moment. But his wrist couldn't feel this heat. He could only feel it when he touched it with his hand. Layers of faint green light emitted from the relic bead, forming a layer of faint green light that enveloped his body. After the faint gray gas in the air encountered the green light, it melted away like ice and snow. It was protecting him at this moment. Chi-Yu couldn't help but be grateful to Master Zagru. If it wasn't for the protection of the relic bead, with his little understanding of fierce beasts and no combat experience in this area, he was afraid that he would have died long ago. Since that gray fog was emitted by the owner of the terrifying and powerful aura, it was not simple. Chi-Yu was right. When his body rose to the highest point, he was already hundreds of meters away from the sea. At this moment, his body was no longer spinning. It was also at this moment that he saw the existence that was attacking him below. Seeing it, Chi-Yu couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The cold feeling flowed from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, and the light in his eyes became filled with despair. What did Chi-Yu see? He saw a snake. Chi-Yu himself wasn't afraid of snakes. With his background, no one had ever controlled him since he was young. In the past, catching some non-venomous cauliflower snakes to make his own snake soup had always been his favorite. However, the snake in front of him was not a cauliflower snake. There were water snakes in the sea, and it was very difficult for water snakes to survive in the sea. Therefore, almost all the snakes in the sea were poisonous and extremely poisonous. But the one in front of Chi-Yu was no longer as simple as a water snake. Even looking down from the sky, Chi-Yu could still clearly see the huge body of this giant snake. The giant snake's body was greenish-black, faintly emitting a faint green light, and it was faintly discernible in the sea. Its body was at least 100 meters long. The huge scales on its body shone with a sinister light. What made Chi-Yu despair was not its huge body, but its head. This giant snake was not like an ordinary snake. From the understanding of humans, because of genetic mutation, snakes may have two-headed snakes, or even three-headed snakes. But what Chi-Yu saw was a body that was 100 meters long and more than 2 meters in diameter. Moreover, it had 9 big heads. The 9 heads of the giant snake were exactly the same, and they were all greenish-black like its body. However, there was a green sarcoma on each head, which looked a bit more ferocious. 9 big heads, 18 huge lantern-like eyes stared firmly at Chi-Yu in the air. There was no expression in its eyes, and it was completely cold. Snakes were originally cold-blooded animals. Chi-Yu recognized this snake. To be precise, he knew the species of this snake. This was a deep-sea nether snake. As he guessed, it was a vicious beast passed down from ancient times. Recently, other than cultivating, Chi-Yu would often consult the Xie on a few questions. The Xie had once carefully explained to him the characteristics of some ancient beasts as well as their strength. The deep-sea nether serpent had been mentioned. The deep-sea nether snake was the strongest in the sea. It was also the ultimate existence of all the water attribute vicious beast. As long as it was in the sea, even Kirin would not dare to provoke it easily. The deep-sea nether snake was also once one of the kings of the ancient vicious beast camp. In the beginning, when Kirin was at his peak, he once led the ancient divine beasts to encircle the ancient vicious beasts on a large scale. Although he could achieve good results, he could not hurt the vitality of the ancient vicious beasts every time. A large part of the reason was the existence of the deep-sea nether snake. Once the ancient vicious beasts could not fight against the ancient divine beasts, these guys would run into the sea. In the sea, there was no divine beast that could compete with the deep-sea nether snake. The deep-sea nether snake not only had extremely powerful strength, but it could also use the sea as its own weapon. Even if Kirin used Kirin's arm with all his strength, he would not be able to gain any advantage over it. Of course, there were two sides to everything. Although the deep-sea nether snake was powerful, it had a fatal shortcoming, and that was, it could not leave the sea. Once it left the sea, no matter how many years the deep-sea nether snake had cultivated, its strength could only be retained by 1/10 or even less in the sea. Therefore, it could only be fierce in the sea, and could not threaten the ancient divine beasts on land. Chi-Yu's mind quickly recalled the origin of the deep-sea nether snake. Of course, he would not think that he could escape the pursuit of the deep-sea nether snake on land. With the strength of the deep-sea nether snake, the so-called not being able to exert its strength on land meant that it was within a certain range of the sea. Judging from the 9-headed deep-sea nether snake in front of him, perhaps the land within 20 kilometers of the sea could become its attack range. Of course, the premise was that its own body did not leave the range of the sea. Chi-Yu heard from Hairyue that a few years ago, there was a violent tsunami on the coast of a few small groups in the east not far from the Yen Huang Republic, causing countless casualties. At that time, she had suspected that the deep-sea nether snake was causing trouble in the eastern sea region. That was why there was endless killing. Now it seemed that Hairyue's guess was very likely. One must know that the strength of the deep-sea nether snake was divided by the number of snake heads. The newly born deep-sea nether snake only had one head. With continuous cultivation, it would only have a second head when it had cultivated for 2.5 years. After that, it would grow an extra head every 1,000 years. And with every additional head, the strength of the deep-sea nether snake would also be greatly enhanced. The deep-sea nether snake in front of him was obviously already 9,000 years old. It was developing in the direction of a 10,000-year beast. Once it reached the level of a 10,000-year beast, it would not be restricted by the sea and could move on land, becoming a truly tyrannical king of beasts. Of course, if the deep-sea nether snake came to land, it would lose the cover of the sea. If it encountered the Kirin clan's ultimate Kirin arm again, it would not be able to resist. After all, even if it had 10,000 years of cultivation, it was still far from being comparable to the energy of water molecules in the vast sea. Therefore, no matter how strong the deep-sea nether snake was, it could only be the strongest in the sea. After Chi Yu's body rose to the highest point, it had already begun to descend quickly. The deep-sea nether snake's 9 huge heads all opened the snake's mouth, and the cold eyes in its eyes carried a bit of awe-inspiring aura. Chi Yu was indeed lucky. With his own strength, he should have been directly swallowed by the deep-sea nether snake's aura. After all, compared to the deep-sea nether snake that had cultivated for 9,000 years, not to mention him, even if all the Zodiac guardian gods were gathered here, together with Xie that had cultivated for 3,000 years, it would still be impossible for them to be the opponent of this supergiant snake. The reason why Chi Yu was able to temporarily preserve his life was indeed thanks to the Sarira bracelet and the Kirin bead that he was wearing. The Kirin bead had no offensive or defensive abilities. However, it possessed an extremely powerful Qilin aura. When the deep-sea nether serpent had tried to launch a sneak attack on Chi Yu, the Qilin bead's powerful aura had caused it to hold back for fear of injuring the Qilin bead. As a result, the amount of energy it used to probe was greatly reduced, and most of it was used to defend itself. The Sarira bracelet was made of the Buddha's treasure Sarira of more than 10 eminent monks. It contained a huge amount of Buddha's power, which was the nemesis of any evil aura. When the Buddha's power encountered the deep-sea nether snake's aura, it naturally emitted, which saved Chi Yu's life. Unfortunately, this was only temporary. When the difference in strength was too great, no matter what kind of magic weapon was used, it was impossible to turn defeat into victory. Even if Chi Yu and the Kirin 8 treasures were gathered, it was still impossible for them to be the opponent of the deep-sea nether snake. After all, his own ability was still too weak. However, would Chi Yu resign himself to death? The answer was, of course, no. Even if he knew that he was going to die, he would still struggle a little, looking for a chance to survive in despair. Therefore, when Chi Yu's body fell, he had already begun to condense the remaining thundercloud force. The deep-sea nether snake was not idle either. The Sarira bracelet was a magic weapon that it was extremely afraid of. An extremely powerful and terrifying aura was emitted from the deep-sea nether snake's body. The seawater below gradually changed and became boiling. The seawater that should have been blue actually turned into a dark green, flashing a faint fluorescent light, as if it was boiling and constantly rising. Under the effect of the deep-sea nether snake's 9 giants, the sea surface gradually rose. Shen Yuan had already pulled the sluggish Su Qing and quickly ran into the distance, but the rising sea surface had already begun to catch up with their pace. Chi Yu's body was approaching the surging green waves. He suddenly shouted, "Come!" On his chest, a red light suddenly rose, and the original black and silver Kirin pattern on his body was suddenly dyed into a gorgeous red. The scorching aura could even be felt from a kilometer away. The surging fire rose into the sky, and Chi Yu's body was like the sun, as if it was completely burning. When the dark green liquid encountered this scorching airflow, it suddenly made a group of harsh sounds, and the unpleasant smell spread in all directions. Chi Yu's body miraculously separated the oily green seawater to both sides. It was his newly acquired Kirin red that showed its power. However, Chi Yu's situation at this time not only did not improve, but it became more dangerous. As Xie said, with his current thundercloud force, using Kirin red defense, he could only persist for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Chi Yu had already fallen less than 10 meters above the surface of the sea in these 3 seconds. At this time, although he had not been polluted by the dark green seawater, the red light around his body, it was already filled with surging water. Kirin red's attribute was fire. In this sea, the power would be reduced. What's more, with Chi Yu's strength, he was far from being able to activate this Kirin artifact and exert its true power. Seeing that he was in front of the seawater, Chi Yu's heart suddenly jumped. At this moment, the potential of his body completely burst out. The meridians that originally ran Kirin thundercloud force in his body instantly became clearer and appeared in front of him. Stepping on the cloud. With a roar, Chi Yu's feet subtly tapped each other, and the four-color light appeared at the same time under his feet. The Kirin pattern on his body suddenly became illusory, as if it was galloping around his body. The four-color light under his feet condensed into a small four-color auspicious cloud, and his body floated up, using the last power of Kirin Red. Once again, he rushed into the dark green seawater that was activated by the deep-sea nether snake. Under the pressure of the surrounding seawater, the light on the Sarira bead converged around Chi Yu's body. In just a moment, the only swimming trunks on Chi Yu's body had already turned into flying ash, and a strong corrosive force continued to penetrate him from the dark green seawater. Although the Sarira bead was a powerful Buddhist artifact, after all, Chi Yu was not a Buddhist cultivator, so the effect that he could use it was very small. At this moment, it could only barely protect his body. The seawater was not calm. Under the control of the deep-sea snake, the huge seawater was filled with endless pressure. The layer of defense laid by the Sarira bead gradually began to crack under this pressure. Once it broke, Chi Yu would probably not even be left with ashes. Chi Yu's mind was spinning. Did he really have to use the ultimate Kirin arm at this time? Boss Xieji, why didn't you save me? Your 10 shadows have also cultivated for 3,000 years. Don't you have any strength left? Just as Chi Yu gritted his teeth and prepared to fight to the death, a white shadow rushed over at an amazing speed. A loud roar that suppressed the tsunami came from the white shadow. The roar turned into an impact energy, and in an instant, the green seawater around Chi Yu's body was shaken away. Chi Yu's thundercloud force was already unable to hold on. It had only been 2 weeks since he started real cultivation. He had used the Kirin Red and the Soaring Cloud Rise, which he had just cultivated. To be able to maintain floating, he had already exerted his full potential. As his body became light, he suddenly felt his whole body collapse. The white shadow wrapped around Chi Yu's body and he flew high. The speed was so fast that the feeling was even stronger than when he was on an airplane. Chi Yu calmed himself down and saw who it was. There were black lines on the white fur, and a pair of huge white wings rose from his back. His limbs became broad, and his sharp claws were 5 inches long. His face was covered with a layer of faint white light. But judging from his aura, it was Su Dong, the perverted tiger of Zodiac City. He finally arrived. At this time, he finally arrived. The 9 heads of the deep-sea nether snake roared angrily at the same time. Obviously, it was angry because its prey was rescued. The 9 heads hit the water at the same time. Then, 9 arrows of seawater flew up in the shape of arrows, and shot toward Chi Yu and Su Dong at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Su Dong increased his flying altitude. His body suddenly turned in the air, and a deep tiger roar came out of his mouth. A strong green light turned into a wind shield, and from the side, he met the 9 water arrows. Su Dong naturally could not be the opponent of the deep-sea nether snake. Therefore, his attack was very clever. He only diverted the water arrows from the side, and then used his high flying speed to pass through the gap. Only then did he barely evade. In just a few flashes, he had already taken Chi Yu to a height of thousands of meters. The deep-sea nether snake seemed to be even more angry, but it did not roar again. Instead, it directly sank into the sea. Su Dong's expression changed. Not good, I'm afraid we can't escape. This deep-sea nether snake is too powerful. Although my speed is very fast, it is launching a large-scale attack. I'm afraid everything within a radius of tens of kilometers will be affected. Heavens, how can such a fierce beast with strength close to 10,000 years suddenly appear? His voice was no longer soft. Instead, it became a low and somewhat hoarse voice. Although it did not sound as comfortable as before, it was full of magnetism. Chi-Yu said, "What should we do? Why don't you fly higher? His attack range is limited." Su Dong smiled bitterly. "Fly higher? Although I am a winged tiger, the height I can fly is also limited. There is also a limit to how high I can fly. This is already the peak of my ability. As the saying goes, the clouds follow the dragon, and the wind follows the tiger. Wind is one of my abilities, but it becomes very difficult to control high up in the sky. I can't go any higher." Chi-Yu frowned. "Then we can only wait for death?" Su Dong smiled bitterly. "Do you have any other ideas? Even if Ryue can make it in time, we can't possibly be a match for this deep-sea nether snake. Even if it only has one head, this kind of super fierce beast is enough to make us suffer. Think about my girlfriend. What are they going to do in the future? Damn Bede." Chi-Yu's eyes suddenly turned cold and focused on the bottom. Although they were separated by thousands of meters, he could still see the dark green seawater spreading towards the shore. It was only a few dozen meters away from Shun Yun and Su Qing. Taking a deep breath, he looked at Su Dong and said firmly, "Once I've restrained the deep-sea nether snake, bring them to a safe place immediately." Before Su Dong could understand Chi-Yu's meaning, a force suddenly came from Chi-Yu's body, and he broke free from his tiger claws. He allowed his body to fall down. At this moment, the deep-sea nether snake's huge body emerged from the seawater. This time, the sea turned purple, and the seawater kept rising strangely. In the seawater, whirlpools with a diameter of 10 meters spun rapidly, spreading towards their surroundings. With Chi-Yu and Su Dong's eyesight, they could clearly see that the entire sea had turned purple. And the whirlpools were rising from the sea as they spread. The number of whirlpools could not be counted at all. These whirlpools were connected to the surface of the sea by a faint purple line. As soon as they left the surface of the sea, their speed instantly increased, turning the entire sky purple. In an instant they spread in all directions. Lin Bing Do Zhe Jiezhen Lai Qian Xing. The divine edict is clear, the sky is clear, the earth is clear, the divine Lord is pure, not tainted, demons and ghosts are subdued, yin and yang are united, descend. Chi-Yu's deep voice rang in the air. His voice was not loud, but every word was sonorous and powerful. When he chanted the first word, the speed of his body's fall began to slow down. When he finished chanting the 9 symbolic words, his body floated quietly in the air without any energy. Following that, the silver and black ink Kirin pattern on Chi-Yu's body really left his body. Chi-Yu's eyes turned completely silver at this moment. His black hair stood on end. An equally terrifying aura also emanated from his body. The Kirin pattern continued to expand. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into a huge light shadow of Kirin that was more than 30 meters long. Kirin lowered its head, and the horn on its head shone with a bright silver-black light. Chi-Yu also raised his right arm at this moment. Was it Kirin's arm breaking the heavens? No, it was not. Even at this moment, Chi-Yu still wanted to take a gamble. He was not willing to spend 100 years to restore his Kirin arm. Silver symbols emerged from the fingertips of Chi-Yu's right hand. The same symbols were also emitted from the horn of the ink Kirin light shadow. The same silver symbols merged in the air, forming a circle that spread to the surroundings. The 9 deep-sea nether snakes below were obviously feeling uneasy. They growled in a low voice, and the greenish-black scales on their bodies turned purple at the same time. The purple vortexes rising from the sea quickly shot towards Chi-Yu's direction like crazy. The corner of Chi-Yu's mouth revealed a trace of a bitter smile. The silver light in his eyes suddenly brightened, and the circle formed from complex silver symbols instantly descended. It actually passed through the purple vortex without any resistance, and in the blink of an eye, enveloped the 9-headed deep-sea nether serpent's enormous body. 18 cold eyes shone with a cold light, and within that cold light, there seemed to be a hint of mockery. The next moment, the deep-sea nether snake's bodies disappeared into thin air. The huge body that was hundreds of meters tall suddenly disappeared. The purple vortexes also turned back into blue seawater because they were no longer under the control of the deep-sea nether snake. They fell into the sea, bringing with them the roar of the formation. Not far away, Xun Yun's face was pale, and he was violently gasping for breath with Su Qing. Just at the moment before the deep-sea nether snakes disappeared, a purple vortex had already reached 3 meters in front of them and was about to swallow them. They were close to death a moment ago, but in the next moment it was as if nothing had happened. Under this strong stimulation, Su Qing suddenly fainted and fell into Xun Yun's arms. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Qi Yu's body, which was originally floating in the air, suddenly fell down. The light shadow of Kirin also quickly disappeared, fusing into his body and disappearing. Even the patterns on his body also disappeared. A white light flashed, and Su Dong caught Qi Yu's body before it fell into the sea. With just a few flaps of his wings, he had already returned to the shore. Qi Yu's whole body was slightly trembling, not because of fear, but because of serious exhaustion. Su Dong smiled bitterly and said, "Why do you have to do this? Don't tell me that we can avoid death like this?" Qi Yu also had a stomach full of bitterness. Perverted tiger, besides this, is there any other way? This is the only way to buy us some time. Forget it, don't send them away. Send me away, at least find a quiet place with no people. It seems to be good to reduce some losses.